discover the surprising, vibrant world of medieval peasants' leisure activities, a side of Middle Ages village life that textbooks rarely show. Although up to 85% of Europe's population toiled in the fields as farmers or serfs, new studies reveal that many worked only about 160 days a year, leaving unexpected time for fun. From compulsory archery practice that forged the legendary English longbowman, to riotous medieval football matches played with a pig's bladder, rustic communities turned legal duties and seasonal pauses into high-energy recreation. Weekly trips to church doubled as social gatherings fueled by strong church ale, while wandering minstrels, mystery plays, and bawdy storytellers delivered the era's blockbuster entertainment straight to the village green. Peasants also enjoyed afternoon siestas, spirited dice games like Hazzard, ice skating on bone skates, water jousting, and even the annual reversal of power carnival led by the Lord of Misrule. Whether brewing homemade ale, bobbing for apples in harvest flirtations, or cheering brutal bear-baiting pits, medieval farmers cultivated a rich culture of play that challenges modern myths of nonstop drudgery. Explore how these forgotten pastimes shaped community bonds, military skill, and folk traditions that still echo in today's sports and festivals. Archery. Every Sunday afternoon the church doors unlatch, the incense swirl thins, and an entirely different ritual takes over the village green. Bowstrings tightening with a papery squeak, yew staves creaking like young trees in wind, and 50 or so farmhands squinting down muddy lanes toward the parish butt. The butt is nothing glamorous, just a hump of earth ringed with half-rotted straw bales, but English statute says every settlement must keep one in repair because a working butt is as vital to the crown as a mint or a courthouse. Since the Assize of Arms in 1252, every man between 15 and 60, serf or free, has been commanded to own a bow, a sheaf of goose-fletched arrows, and the muscle memory to hit a dinner plate at 200 paces. Lords repeat the order until it feels like liturgy. Priests, eager not to lose tithes to enemy arrows, praise the practice from pulpits. Even the manor reeve, who fines you for letting pigs roam, shows up with his own stave and a grin the size of Michaelmas. Across the Channel, similar mandates echo from Bruges to Bologna, but England leans into archery with a zeal that borders on obsession. The king wants a nation of long bowmen because armoured knights are ruinously expensive, crossbows are cursed by papal bull, and professional soldiers eat taxes like weevils in a grain bin. Archers, though, they grow on common ground. A yew bow costs a week's wages, true, but it lasts a decade if you oil it and avoid damp straw. Arrows can be fletched during Lent evenings, and weekly practice slips neatly between matins and evensong. Parish rolls prove the rhythm, mass at 8, ale at 9, arrow flights till noon, gossip the whole time. It's duty dressed up as recreation, or maybe recreation dressed up as duty. Either way, the entire lower half of society is conscripted into a Sunday league. The king doesn't have to bankroll. Every village adds spices. One hamlet pits married men against bachelors, loser buying church ale. Another hangs a straw pig for blunt arrow butchery. Thump the target, win the snout, stew it for supper. Betting is technically sinful, but when the curate nails 3 bulls' eyes, he pockets half a dozen eggs for the poor, and nobody complains. The church even supplies prizes, wax candles, leftover wafers, because a confident archer doubles as a parish wall against raiders, and a parish with sturdy walls tithes more regularly. The crown, meanwhile, worries about distractions. Edward III issues a royal writ in 1363 banning football, handball, skittles, anything that steals time from the butt. The writ scolds idle and gossiping games, stipulates fines, and instructs sheriffs to confiscate pig bladder balls. 12 months later, the same villages are back at hand-to-hand football with twice the fervour, bladder punctured, bowstrings neglected. So the crown doubles down, sheriffs post watchmen near greens, mayors impose curfews, yet the people improvise by shooting arrows in the dim glow of tavern lanterns. Archery survives because it is both command and carnival. Defy the king and risk the stocks, obey him and claim bragging rights, plus a beaker of dark ale. Dark ale matters. After the arrows are pulled and the straw bales straightened, everyone gravitates toward the ale bench. Peasant evenings run on homebrew, no stronger than small wine, 2% alcohol at best, ladled from a copper cauldron that never fully cools. Brew day is women's domain. Widows and brewsters guard malt secrets like bishops guard relics. The law exposes muscle, the alehouse soothes it. Sip by sip, shoulders unclench, rival villages swap insults that dissolve into laughter, and the fat reeve, who couldn't hit the butt to save his tithe, pretends he let the youngsters win. Nothing about the scene feels tactical until, that is, you pivot forward to August 26th, 1346. On a sloping wheat field outside Crécy-en-Ponthieu, 10,000 English long bowmen dig their heels into chalky soil and release storm clouds of ash, shafted arrows. French cavalry, glittering like river fish in plate and velvet, charge uphill and vanish under a sleet of iron bodkin points. Chronicler Jean Froissart swears the sky darkens. Modern archaeologists, sifting the battlefield, recover arrowheads by the bucketful. The butts, the bets, the ale, sweetened Sunday drills. Everything funnels into that afternoon when commoners drop chivalry with the plain geometry of draw, loose, repeat. The king's gamble, that leisure could double as military training, pays off in corpses and captured banners. England walks away with loot, ransom, and a legend. Peasants walk away with proof that their hobby can fell armoured lords the way a well-placed axe splits kindling. Fast forward to any random Sunday again. A breeze tugs smoke from cottage chimneys. The parish clerk ticks names on a flimsy parchment. Latecomers sprint, boughs clattering, because absence incurs a penny fine. Some men relish the drill, flexing calloused fingers, gauging draw weight. Others groan, backs ache from ploughing, infants kept them up, or they'd simply rather chase the bladder in a muddy scrimmage. But the law will not bend. If football bruises a knee, you can still draw. If cricket splits a shirting seam, you can still draw. If you split an arrow's shaft and lose the yard game, you buy a round and vow revenge next week. The church bell rings anyway. Picture one more layer. Village competitions ladder up to county shoots. Winners earn silver tip arrows or, in flush decades, a yew stave imported from Italian sapwood. Those meets become fairs in themselves. Peddlers hawk ribbons. Tinkers sharpen penknives. Balladeers compose ditties about a bright-eyed bowman who kissed 3 maids in Beverley. Records from a 1457 Yorkshire muster list archers' heights because the crown wants men tall enough to pull 160-pound bows. A scrawny lad skilled at the butt might slip the net, but a broad-shouldered ploughman cannot hide. Sheriffs tag him for the king's next chevauchée across France. That knowledge lingers in every arrow knocked. Glory on Sunday may cost you a draft notice by Michaelmas. The church's stance stays pragmatic. Officially, gaming for wages remains a sin. Unofficially, church wardens enter pies and ale barrels in prize pools to encourage honest practice. One London parish rents its north aisle for weekday fletching, 3 artisans crafting arrows under stained glass of martyrdom scenes. The contradiction is delicious. Inside God's house, men build weapons. Outside, they down ale and shoot. In France, those same arrows might pierce French cloth stitched with Marian lilies. Royal statutes expand. By 1477, King Edward IV orders every shopkeeper in London to own bows equal to the number of male apprentices. Failure costs a mark per man. The city, already jammed, carves target ranges in marshland east of Moorgate. Fishmongers complain arrow shafts scare carp. Archers complain fishermen snag fletchings. Compromise. Shoot mornings, fish afternoons, drink together sundown. In tavern corners the talk turns to Flemish crossbows. Quicker to learn, yes, but slower to fire. And the Dutch pike blocks gnawing at Burgundy. England clings to the longbow because it is cheap, fearsome, and woven into Sunday routine like psalms. Other sports strain against the ban. Football, still bruising knees, prowls hedgerows. Young men chase the ball anyway. Sheriffs confiscate anyway. The green churns to mud anyway. Cricket sprouts later, a genteel whisper of a game. but Edward VI, Protector Somerset, briefly bans it near Butts to keep the shooting lanes clear. Saints' lives entwine. Saint Sebastian, martyred by arrows, becomes archers' patron. Guilds adopt his image, sponsor feasts that double as tournaments. A 1492 Norwich Guild ledger lists expenses: 3 candles, 2 barrels ale, 1 wax figure of Sebastian to crown the range, and fines for any member caught bowling when he should be bracing a bow. Drinking alcohol, the last furrow is turned, the oxen are unharnessed, and a peal of dusk bells spreads like warm water across the fields. Straightway the village begins to pivot from labour to liquid comfort. Spades bang mud against a hedge, doors creak, and you can smell roasted malt before you see the glow of the brew hearth. A medieval peasant has few tools for coping with relentless cold, repetitive strain, sudden famine, or the aching sense that rents always outrun wages, but a ceramic cup of home-brewed ale, barely stronger than kombucha by modern standards, puts a padded glove over raw nerves. Everyone drinks: the reeve, the ploughboy, the widow who lost her teeth to rye grit, even the priest once he clicks the sacristy latch. Yet the relationship between booze and medieval life is nothing like the pop culture cartoon of eternally drunk serfs slurping brown sludge because the well is poison. Archaeologists tugging soil cores around English greens keep finding wells lined with clean river rock and wooden pumping staves that suggest surprisingly good water hygiene. The ale is not a desperate substitute, but a metabolically sensible liquid bread, thick with B vitamins, safe calories, and just enough alcohol, often 2% or less, to dull a blister without blunting the next morning's dawn whistle. Before the late 15th century, real inebriation is a luxury. Ale is brewed at home in 3-gallon batches that sour within days if hops are scarce, so downing flagons until speech slurs just wastes the week's grain ration. Contemporary sermons bellow against gluttony far more than drunkenness, and manor court rolls between 1200 and 1400 fine villagers for skipping archery practice, for fighting over hedges, even for wearing too much scarlet cloth, but rarely for public intoxication. When winemakers in Gascony complain that English merchants drink them dry, they mean London aldermen and abbots, not field hands. Strong drink is a class marker. Monastic breweries in Flanders perfect barley behemoths topping 8%, slicing barrels open for visiting bishops. English nobility import that double beer by flute ship and brag about its heady foam. Continental nobles quaff wine because grapes grow where armies shelter. Peasant households raise barley so they swallow small ale and call the weak wash God's peace in clay. Walk into any yard in East Anglia or the Meuse Delta on brew day, and the division of labour snaps into view. Men haul water in shoulder yokes, but women supervise the mash tun. Widowhood grants legal cover to own property, so breweries blossom under female hands. Our word, brewster, is specifically feminine, immortalized in Marjorie Kempe's autobiographical note that she once tried the trade before piety sent her out chasing visions. Recipes travel mouth to mouth: 1 part crushed brown malt, 1 bucket boiling water, stir with ash wood paddle, let rest until a sugary porridge, wort, streams out of a straw stoppered hole. Once cooled, yeast, scooped from the last batch or borrowed from a neighbour's crock, turns sugar to carbon dioxide and alcohol. Within 48 hours a pale froth pops like rice in hot oil. Skim it, ladle into kegs, hammer in a wood bung, and start sipping. Because the drink teeters at the edge of spoilage, families keep cups cycling dawn to dusk, and children slurp watered ale as readily as porridge. Monks, richer in grain and spice, push alcohol content higher. Benedictine cellars near Ghent record quadruple mash ratios and flavour, with bog myrtle or yarrow long before hops claim dominion, but none of that trickles into a ploughman's mug until trading links thicken in the 14th century. Even then cost is gatekeeper. 1 pitcher of monastic double can equal a haycutter's weekly wage, so the big beer serves as payment to field crews only at harvest or on church feast days, when landlords calculate generosity will echo up to heaven. Church ales crystallize the alliance between faith and fermentation. A parish needs new roof lead? Announce a Saint's Eve ale, Everyone pitches malt, the brewsters fire cauldrons, and the churchyard transforms into a boisterous beer garden. People pay a penny a pot, gulp something closer to 6%, and dance the carol until the squires sweat through silk hose. The prophet bankrolls rude screen paint or a misericord carving, and the priest can claim he merely facilitated charity. Ecclesiastical courts complain that some church ales leak into unhonest mixing of sexes, but they rarely outlaw the custom because no other fundraiser works half as well. Where else will villagers toss half their egg clutch into a communal bucket just for a chance to two-step with the reeve's daughter? Real drunkenness creeps in late, almost hand in hand with urban cash wages and technological drift. Around 1470, hopped beer from the Low Countries floods London wharves in vast, preservable casks. Hops both lengthen shelf life and goose alcohol content because yeast can chew sugar longer without bacterial sabotage. Taverns, newly licensed to stay open past dusk, start selling stoneware jugs labelled Good Double Beer. The social shift is immediate. You can now get hammered on credit, leaving a tally mark the length of your thumb on a slate board behind the bar. Government eyes widen, excise duty beckons, ale conners, officials sworn to monitor quality, suddenly police quantity too. Then circa 1500 Europe cracks the distilling code. Alchemists in Salerno and Cordoba had long known how to coax pure spirits from wine, but the cooling coil, an Arab refinement, makes the apparatus cheaper, and copper stills migrate from monastery infirmaries into backyard sheds. Distillation flips the drinking landscape. A weak quart of small ale barely tickles senses. 4 ounces of aquavitae hits like a smith's hammer. Peasants quick to innovate realize low-grade barley plus a second-hand pot still equals a clear liquor they can sell by the ladle. The manorial law doesn't yet tax spirits. Medieval accountants have no category for liquid thunder, so smuggling thrives. A husband patches roof at dawn, distills at noon, swaps rye whiskey for rabbit snares at dusk. Clergy fret. The fiery water surges through feast halls, bloats sin lists. Sermons sprout, wine gladdens, ale comforts, but spirits summons Satan. Yet tavern books prove customers love the kick. By 1550, stage plays spoof country rustics enamored of hot-spiced Hollands, code for Geneva, early gin, imported through Amsterdam. London greets the drink with suspicion, then approval when Elizabeth I taxes foreign distillate and encourages an English version to starve Dutch coffers. Parliament eventually writes gin acts to quell consumption. None bite as hard as the little copper still glowing in a peasant's byre. Go to church. The bell rings in a single silver ripple before dawn, and a whole village reaches for its walking staves. Fields are rimed white, oxen breathe fog from wooden nostrils, and hens protest the chill. Yet no one lingers. The weekly march to church is as fixed as sunrise. Christianity is not simply a theory floating above thatched roofs. It is the timetable that braids an entire medieval life. Plant on Rogation, harvest on Lammas, confess before Advent, bury at Candlemas. For peasants, the calendar's crown jewel is Sunday, the only morning the plough stays parked, and a man can hold his wife's hand in public without neighbours snickering that work is being shirked. The first few steps crack frost under hobnails. After a mile, the lane fills with bodies, family upon family, merging like streams into a river until the whole shire seems to migrate toward stone towers rising beyond hedgerows. The journey itself feels festive. Boys race ahead, stabbing puddle ice, girls knot ribbons into one another's braids, and grown men compare barley prices while shifting toddlers from tired shoulders to fresh ones. Some parishes lie just a furlong away. Others require a 2-hour trek over stiles, through hazel copses, across a moor spiked with gorse. Nobody complains. This is the closest thing to a holiday many will see until harvest home. A friar travelling the same road might share rumours, an eclipse due at Michaelmas, a new indulgence in Norwich, plague flaring somewhere south. So the walk doubles as a newsfeed. At each crossroad, another hamlet adds to the procession. By the time the first notes of the vesper bell kiss the wind, the lane has become a moving marketplace of gossip, betrothal hints, and toddlers angling for honey cakes promised after Mass. The church itself stands massive, dwarfing every barn for 20 miles, built of limestone ferried on ox sledges by the grandfathers of the very men kneeling at its porch. Peasants paid for those blocks with decades of tithe and willingly volunteer corvée days to hoist beams into place. Even the poorest serf beams with proprietary pride on entering, because he and his forebears literally underwrote the nave. Arches climb like frozen waves, stained glass snatches whatever shy winter sun slips through the clouds, and a narthex floor of encaustic tiles shines where thousands of boots have polished them. This is a palace the poor get to own for a morning every 7 days. Liturgical choreography kicks in, men peel left, women right, children funnel toward the rood screen where a wooden Christ rises above a Venetian lamp. The priest intones Latin. Most congregants cannot decipher a syllable, but they read body language. Bow here, cross yourself there, shuffle forward when the sacristan jingles the Sanctus bell. The soundscape would stun a modern ear. Plainsong floats under rafters, votive candles hiss, and an infant's whimper ricochets off stone. Once a quarter, a visiting bishop throws polyphony into the mix. Scholars will one day label it English discant, but for now, it is simply the moment a goatherd's daughter closes her eyes, forgets cracked hands, and imagines a heaven where everyone sings on key. Between collect and gospel, farmers steal glances at carvings along the misericords, mermaids combing hair, foxes preaching to geese, a knight upside down in a dragon's jaws. These are inside jokes the carvers smuggled in with tacit priestly consent because the images preach humility faster than a sermon. Remember, soul, you can still land in dragon guts. As the choir swells for the Gloria, drones from a single portative organ rise. That organ is a technological marvel, a leather bellows, tin pipes, and a keyboard no wider than a bale of flax. Villagers collected half a year's tithe surplus to hire a travelling craftsman who slept in the rood loft while shaping metal reeds. The organ wheezes on cold mornings, but when coaxed, rings like daylight through green glass. Mass ends with Ite, Missa Est, yet nobody bolts for home. Congregants linger in the porch, men discussing last season's wool clip, women exchanging recipes for nettle soup fortified with bacon rind. A clerk posts bans of marriage on the door, reading aloud 3 pending unions. Giggles follow each name as rivals calculate romantic odds. The priest, now free of Eucharistic gravity, wades into the crowd smiling at babies, noting who skipped confession, and quietly pocketing oaths of grain earmarked for upcoming candles. A monk stationed near the Lichgate Hawks lead badges forged at Canterbury depicting St. Thomas's sword blow crown. Buy one, strap it to your hat, and announce to the world that you, too, aided the Cathedral Roof Fund. Then comes church ale. Early in the week, Brewster widows fired giant coppers behind the vestry, blending stronger malt, pricier hops, and exotic spices, coriander, bog myrtle, into a batch no household would dare drink without neighbours to steady wobbly legs. Casks sit in the south porch half hidden under embroidered linen cloth, sweating a promise. For a penny per mug, 2 pennies buys unlimited refills, a parishioner can claim riverine mouthfuls of brew easily twice as potent as weekday small ale. Families lacking coin may donate eggs, beet greens, or a promise to help rethatch the vicarage. The money flow will replace broken gargoyle spouts or extend the graveyard wall next spring. Thus, charity tastes like toasted barley. Ale dissolves class membranes in a way nothing else can. The Reeves wife and the Reeves scullery maid share a bench because the bench is the only plank close enough to the fiddler's toe-tapping shadow. The fiddler, incidentally, is a freeman from 2 parishes away, paid in leftovers and lodging in the church porch, so his music stitches post-mass energy into dance. Boys stomp the carol in a circle, step right, step in, hands raised, heads back, a living halo of laughter. Girls answer with a weaving branle, skirts flirting with frost rim. The curate, nursing half a mug, pretends to study psalm translations while foot tapping beneath his cassock. Sometime after midday, Bell people drift out for the optional spectacle, a mystery play staged on wagon beds in the market square. Not every Sunday boasts a play, but when script cycles roll around, Corpus Christi in June, or Advent in early December, dramatists haul painted flats depicting Eden or Golgotha and rehearse lines learned from guild scrolls. Today the Weavers' Guild handles the Annunciation. Gabriel enters in borrowed choirboy robes, hoists papier-mâché wings, and recites stiff Latin, doctored with fart jokes, to keep younger spectators awake. Next wagon cues the shipwright's Noah pageant. Noah's wife refuses the ark, brandishes a broom, and the crowd shrieks when a neighbour playing ham slips on ale mud and nearly dunks the dove cage. To modern eyes it is slapstick. To medieval peasants it is Pixar meets catechism, doctrine in technicolor. They learn theology without reading a page. As shadows lengthen, the church bells toll no nids. Travellers lodging overnight unfurl bedrolls in aisles, pilgrims, identifiable by scallop shells pinned to cloaks, trade stories of relics glimpsed at Compostela or Chartres. Pilgrimage is vacation plus penance, for many peasants the only chance to roam beyond the manor. A devout ploughman may save 5 years to walk barefoot to Walsingham, purchase a lead badge shaped like Our Lady's slipper, and come home limping yet radiant. His neighbours, still tied to winter sowing, ask for tales of shrines that bleed and Madonna statues that wink. He obliges by moonlight over the last of the church ale, voice wobbly but eyes fierce. Generosity surfaces in surprising nooks. A baker's dozen rye loaves appear outside the porch. No note, but everyone knows a childless couple near the heath quietly left them for widows who sang loudest during the Sanctus. A reeve's daughter slips a copper farthing into the poor box. She earned it spinning tow for a merchant's sailcloth, yet hands it over because she hopes St. Margaret will intercede for her upcoming childbirth. Even the infamous money-gouging of tithe collectors lessens after church ale. Nobody wants a ledger out while people waltz. The squire, calculating goodwill like a chess move, sometimes drops a coin for every crust tossed toward orphans. The symbolism buys him forgiveness for next month's forest fines. When twilight finally blurs carving shadows into one broad bruise, the congregation disperses. Some families must tramp 2 hours home, passing wayside crosses lit by stubs of votive candles. Each flame flickers a name of a loved one lost. The walk back feels shorter, ale warms blood, hymns echo, children doze on shoulders. Pockets lighter, hearts heavier with stories, they step into cottages smelling of turnip tops stewed in onion broth. Tomorrow the Lord's woodward will demand coppicing, the abbot's bailiff will weigh barley, and the endless ledger of survival resumes. But Sunday lingers like an ember under ash, radiating comfort. Monotony breaks altogether if the priest announces an outgoing pilgrimage. Maybe he declares a group trek to Canterbury, 40 miles each way, sleeping in barns, paying pennies for pottage, swapping Canterbury tales, caliber gossip. Peasants sign up because Canterbury equals indulgence remission, knock years off purgatory, see jewelled reliquaries, buy tin pewter souvenirs shaped like St. Thomas's sword. The trip is both sacred and hedonistic. Marching songs, impromptu wrestling matches, flirtations along hedge breaks. One chronicle from 1395 records a widow who joined pilgrimage primarily to buy Norwich saffron for Christmas bread, but came home bragging about hearing polyphonic plainsong that melted her spine. That spine melt is a souvenir money can't price. Even those who never travel still invest spare pence into grand cathedrals. Craft guilds dispatch representatives to Gloucester or Lincoln with pledges, 3p for a window, half a pig for roof repair. Donors' names scratched into lead cames return home, as proof peasants help hold heaven's tent over England. When a news peddler later reports that York Minster's new east window glows like a sunrise of ruby and sapphire, villagers nod knowingly. Some of that red cost their chickens winter eggs, napping and sleep patterns. Picture a July sunrise in 1375 that feels stretched thin, like parchment pulled too tight over a drum. The village rooster has not yet cleared its throat, but a few women are already stooping over the communal bake oven, arms white with flour. Everyone else, men, teenagers, toddlers who slept through a teething night, is still pinned to straw ticks that smell of sweat and sweet rushes. Nobody expects these ticks to cradle a solid 8 hours. In fact, no one in this hamlet has even heard the modern spell that says, "Sleep must be one unbroken dark river." They navigate the night in 2 distinct ferries, first sleep from twilight till sometime after midnight, a wakeful interlude, then second sleep that floats them to dawn. No roosters, pocket watches, or bells dictate the midpoint. The body knows. It cools, respiration slows, and then, like a lantern guttering when the oil dips, eyes open. From that instant until drowsiness reclaims them, villagers step into a liminal zone, thick with whispered stories, quick chores, illicit trysts, and prayers that intermingle with the crackle of a banked hearth. The rhythm is ancient, older than oil lamps, confirmed by every scrap of archival lint historians can reach. Monkish diaries itemizing matins between sighs about cold cloisters, court depositions time-stamping burglaries at hour after first sleep. Herbal manuals advising patients to take laxatives during the wakeful gap, so bowels won't be roused again before cock crow. Roger E. Kirch's comb through 500 early modern testimonies shows the phrase "first sleep" ricocheting from Yorkshire wills to Venetian trade letters. In one 14th century Kent manor roll, a milkmaid confesses to stealing a neighbour's cheese in the waking. Shorthand the reeve understands without clarification. Those who cannot read the sky read the body's bold print: wake, drift, dream again. Consider the first sleep. By sunset, the cottage, 1 room, mud floor, thatch roof, stuffed with bracken to discourage rats, glimmers in rushlight. The day's final tasks unfold: fetter the geese, stir the bean pottage, tuck the younger children along the outer edge of the family pallet, so they gain any modest warmth that seeps from adult bodies. No one undresses completely. Linen underwear is too precious to launder often, and chimney smoke would blacken anything left hanging. Within minutes, the room hums with snores. Outside, an owl patrols the rafters. Under its sweep, spiders finish web repairs and wait for moth collisions. The world narrows to breath, heartbeat, and straw, crackling like tiny fireworks. Midnight steals its cue from silence. A coal pops in the hearth, and a mother rises, careful not to knee a child. She stokes embers with a hazel switch, adds a 2-finger chunk of peat, and lets orange light ooze across the sleeping row. If she's nursing, this is feeding time. If not, she may lift a lid on the pottage to be sure it has not attracted mice. A father eases outside, unhooks the stable latch, and checks that the calf has not knocked over the water bucket. Sky, spattered with stars visible in zero light pollution, suggests another 4 hours before dawn's grey tide erases constellations. He spits into cold ashes, stretches shoulders knotted from scything rye, and steps back indoors, already shaping tomorrow's to-do list. In many cottages, the interlude births conversation, a low murmur so as not to raise tots into full consciousness. It might start with the husband recounting a dream. He saw a crow pecking grain spilled near the manor gate and wonders if it portends hunger. The wife replies with an ancient call and response charm: "Black is the crow, but bright be the sheaf," the medieval equivalent of "don't jinx us." Sometimes the chat drifts toward the outrageous, how Brother Alan, the visiting monk, stank of brandy during vespers, or how the reeve's new boots shine suspiciously like the tanner's stolen hide. Secrets fit the night better than daylight, nested in darkness thick enough to swallow indiscretion. According to humoral physicians like Guy de Chauliac, this interval helps digestion. Heavy pottage consumed at sunset sits in the upper stomach. The wakeful gap allows it to descend so that second sleep can proceed untroubled by flatulence or nightmare. Modern chronobiologists attempting segmented sleep experiments in Surrey laboratories back up the intuitive wisdom. Test subjects granted 2 4-hour blocks with a 1-hour waking window registered more total slow wave and REM minutes than those forced into 1 8-hour block. Their dream diaries clustered vivid, sometimes ecstatic imagery into the second sleep, mirroring medieval literature, from Chaucer to Piers Plowman, where visionary adventures almost always strike after the interval. Not every cottage fills the wake with whispers. Some seize the privacy for sex. A bishop's penitential manual from 1340 warns couples not to fornicate more than thrice a night, nor in the interval between first and second sleep, lest the Holy Spirit depart. The manual betrays its own anxieties. Parishioners evidently used that slot with gusto. Fertility logic corroborates. Sperm concentrations peak after moderate rest, and in an economic model where more offspring equals more labor, nighttime intimacy is both recreation and investment. Church courts scold, but even their case files assume the rhythm. A 1423 adultery accusation specifies between sleeps as the window when a neighbor crept through the wattle. Older children, half-roused, beg for stories. Grandparents oblige with folk tales of shape-shifting hares, saints outwitting devils, or practical fables explaining why nettles sting. These oral transmissions stitch psychological resilience into tiny listeners before literacy can. Because the interval falls under darkness, tales tilt macabre. Blood-red fountains, skulls glowing blue, lakes that swallow oath-breakers whole. Fear radiates, but so does moral order. Keep promises, share bread, respect thresholds. By the time second sleep tugs eyelids, kids carry a hard-wired narrative compass. When fatigue reasserts itself, sleepers crumble like scorched parchment. The second stretch holds fewer tosses, more vivid dreams. Thomas of Cantimpre's Natural Philosophy Compendium notes that if you want prophetic vision, meditate on a psalm during the waking, lie back before dawn, and keep pepper under your tongue. Whether pepper matters is moot. What matters is consciousness, sliding back into delta waves more willingly than before. Come daybreak, people rise with imaginations primed. Now fast forward to midday in high summer. The field crew has been sweating since first light, cutting barley while dew still bastes stalks for easier slicing. By 10th hour, somewhere after modern 2 p.m., the sun hangs like a blacksmith's furnace. Cloaks double as shade tents. The wise retreat. In Northern Europe, no moral stigma attaches to a daytime nap, especially for those who began hours-long toil at dawn. Hildegard of Bingen, the polymath abbess, recommends a post-lunch siesta to blunt the heat's corruption of sanguine humor. Farmers sprawl under pollarded willows, bellies mixed with onions, rye crusts and watered ale, heads cushioned on seed sacks. The siesta might span 15 minutes or an hour, depending on clouds. A passerby's shout, a goat's bleat, or the angle of sunlight through leaves serves as organic alarm clock. Wakefulness returns less with jarring panic than with a yawn, back stretch, and the soft crack of spine resetting. Women in Cottage Row adopt a parallel pattern. After morning laundering, carrying pails from stream, wringing garments, and laying them on hedges, they retreat indoors for blind man's peace. A 15-minute micro-sleep, with kerchief pulled over eyes while bread rises. Widows carding wool stop card strokes mid-pull, elbows frozen till the spindles whir, fades. Children not engaged in berry-picking build canopy forts under dining boards, drifting into half-dreams alongside barn cats. This patchwork of naps ripples through village life like eddies in a slow river. Some scholars argue medieval labor, though physically vicious, ran at an overall slower clock speed than today's city bustle. Manor court documents certainly reveal numerous days lost for weather. 16th-century Venetian diplomat Girolamo Lippomano complains English peasants work with one eye on the sky, ready to down tools and gossip whenever clouds gather. Modern agricultural historian Judith Bennett recalculates annual man-hours and concludes an able-bodied ploughman logged perhaps 160 intense workdays annually, padded with holy days, Sundays, illness spells, and crop lulls. Into those gaps, sleep, nighttime segmented or afternoon snatched, slides easily. Segmentation shows up even in architecture. Excavations at Warham Percy uncover cottages with central hearths, but sleeping benches distributed along walls rather than clustered, supporting theories that families after first sleep needed aisle space to pace. Nurse infants, stoke fires. Earth floors bear extra scuff marks between pallet zones, further hinting at nocturnal circulation. Fire dogs in hearths often fashioned with extended prongs. perfect for banking logs to smoulder long enough so that coals still glow by second sleep's onset. The psychology accompanying such rhythms differs from modern sleep guilt. No peasant feels defective for waking at midnight. Chronic insomnia, in our sense of staring panicked at the ceiling, hardly exists. If cows need checking, you check. If a neighbour's dog howls, you listen for wolves. If nothing presses, you meditate on the dance of sparks from oak embers. Within minutes, drowsiness sidles back like a polite guest who stepped out to relieve himself. Minstrels, you are weeding kale in late afternoon haze when a distant trill of pipe and tambourine lifts your head like a fishing line tugging a float. That sound can only mean one thing: minstrels, and not the court-kept sort who travel with heraldic wagons and prearranged fanfare, but the lean, dusty, wandering breed whose arrival turns any anonymous hamlet into the hottest playhouse in Christendom for one night only. You sling the hoe against a fence, shout that you are off to fetch water, though every neighbour knows better, and jog toward the lane where birds already scatter from the commotion. The procession appears in shimmered heat like a mirage, a short cart pulled by a piebald pony, its wheels squealing an E-flat with every rotation, a lanky jongleur balancing 3 wooden clubs painted in peeling stripes, a stocky drummer whose goatskin tabor thumps a beat strong enough to rattle the fillings in teeth not yet invented, and, towering at the back, a singer carrying a gittern slung with twine because proper gut strings cost more than a year's wool tithe. Around them swarm village children, whooping like gulls over fishing scraps, and grandmothers pretending shock while secretly elbowing one another to claim seats close to the action. Those elders know something the toddlers do not. Wandering minstrels are part circus, part newsfeed, part therapy, and part threat, all delivered free if the audience can cover supper and a barn's worth of barley straw for sleeping. 2 kinds of performers dominate medieval Europe. First, the house minstrels hired by barons or kings, a velvet-sleeved, silver-badged elite whose job description covers lullabies for heirs, bragging ballads during feasts, and subtle espionage when their lord needs eavesdropped gossip from another hall. Their names show up in royal ledgers. To Master Gulbert the Looter, 6 shillings 8 pence for a new composition to laud the Battle of Slies. They play citolets trimmed in ivory, travel under heraldic protection, and sleep on feather mattresses. The second tribe, far larger, walk the roads under sun and frost with everything they own rattling in a handcart. Chroniclers label them in a dozen tongues: jongleur, spielleute, gleeman, gitanero, but the villagers bunched along today's dirt lane call them simply the show. A court retainer might juggle fire for a duchess, yet a wandering minstrel will juggle turnips to make a ploughboy laugh and barter for a heel of cheese. Their shoes are patched pigskin, their cloaks a quilt of donation fragments, their faces half hidden behind dust masks of every county mile. And still they radiate wattage, people jam windows, sheep bleat excitedly, and even the manor reeve, stern guardian of tithe barns, loiters near the ale bench in case the music plays a drinking song he cannot resist. Payment, as custom dictates, is a scattershot of edible currency. One performer collects loaves, another wheels of half-cured cheese. A widow hands over 3 smoked herrings, a cooper promises to mend the troop's busted barrel. The reeve, wary of appearing stingy, tosses a crooked silver half-groat into the tambourine. The minstrels weigh generosity with hawk eyes. If supper looks thin, they will shorten the night's play. If villagers splurge, the troupe may unveil an extra tableau, perhaps St. George fighting a papier-mâché dragon puffing pea-straw smoke. Tonight offerings overflow. Last season's harvest was heavy, so the troupe's leader winks and announces a special story after moonrise. Robin Hood and the Abbot's Gold, a fan favourite, heavy on clerical humiliation and archery stunts. Performance sites vary. Sometimes a green wide enough to host a scythe contest becomes stage. Other times the church porch suffices if the priest owes the troupe a favour for earlier gossip delivered between confessional slots. Tonight's venue is a threshing barn swept clear of chaff with hay bales stacked into amphitheatre tiers. Lanterns dangle from cruck beams. The smell is half sweet straw, half horse sweat, and wholly electric. Villagers pack in shoulder to shoulder, children perched on rafters, dogs circling for dropped crumbs. The air itself feels pregnant. One spark could ignite both hay and anticipation. The act opens with juggling, the universal icebreaker across languages and social orders. The lanky jongleur spins 3 clubs, then 4, then does that rumpus move where he passes a club between his legs while hopping on one foot. Gasps surge like ocean tide. Someone whispers that only diabolical aid can keep wood floating mid-air. But the devil talk melts when the jongleur swaps to knife juggling, blade edges real enough to shave a pig. A hush grips the barn. You can hear mice freeze in the rafters. When no blood spills, applause detonates, pitchfork handles rapping floorboards like war drums. Next, the stocky drummer flips into comedic patter, teasing the reeve about his bald spot, the miller about flour dust on his breeches, the village physician about leeches too scrawny to cure fleas. Medieval comedy runs bawdy and sharp. Insults fly faster than the fiddler can tap a 6/8 rhythm. Laughter rattles wooden walls until the troupe's singer raises a hand for silence and launches the ballad set. His voice starts low as distant thunder and climbs measure by measure into a falsetto that makes children's neck hair stand on end. Most popular are outlaw tales. The Robin Hood cycle resonates because it condenses every village frustration, fines, taxes, arrogant sheriffs, into a single green-hooded archer who humiliates authority with wit and arrow. Verses rattle out. Robin bent his trusty yew and marked the abbot's purse in view. A tithe, he laughed, for widow's brew. The church may keep the box. Every punchline at the abbot's expense earns a shouted "Ho!" and foot stomps. The priest, red-eared but smiling, sips spiced ale to calm embarrassment, thinking perhaps these arrows are spiritual tests. Old women near the hay door repeat the refrain under their breath. Tomorrow they will hum it while carding wool. Ballads slide into news bulletin. A French port rumoured seized, plague pockets flickering in Calais, a new child raised to the Scottish throne. Peasants rarely travel 10 miles from birth cradle. Minstrels become mobile gazettes. They embellish, but kernels of truth lodge in memory. By dawn every cottage will know which foreign army lost a duke and which bishop, rumoured, bedded a laundress. Then comes magic. The troupe's conjurer, wearing a patched jerkin embroidered with tarnished bells, lifts a wooden cup, slips in a pebble, and, voila, produces a live mouse. He turns straw into a trickle of coins, borrows the tanner's cap, extracts a domino of linked rings. Superstition twitches. Miracles belong inside church walls, not barns. Yet fear mixes with joy. Peasants crave marvels as proof life isn't only sweat and turnip porridge. The conjurer bows, winks at a shy girl in front row, and returns the tanner's cap, heavier than before. The tanner's broad grin says the coin will become Sunday shoes for his boy. Comedy returns by way of the fool, white painted face, inflated pig bladder tied to a stick, mocking local dialects and courting scandal by parroting the Lord's famous stutter. He cartwheels, pants split to reveal patched undies. Villagers howl, even the dignified steward wheezes behind a violin case. Humiliation you can laugh at becomes communal therapy. Break time, torches thrust outside cast swords of light into chilly dark. People swarm a trestle loaded with trenchers, thick pottage, oat bread, salted pork ends, and of course ale, mild for children, stronger for those who paid double. Troopers move through crowd collecting small coins, thanking donors, promising that the second half will include acrobatics, so dangerous we taught the angels to catch us. Behind the barn, a cooper's apprentice flirts with the jongleur's sister, her eyes embered by torch glow, and promises to sneak a wedge of blue cheese into her bundle if she'll play him a love song. The second act elevates stunts. The acrobat pair, barefoot, leather breeches creaking, unfold a 50-foot hemp rope hoisted to the ridge beam. No net. A village mother hides her face in apron folds. The climber scrambles up, flips backward, then balances on a single heel while spinning an iron ring in one hand. Legend and fear say if he falls, the barn becomes his coffin. Tension grips. He recites a quick prayer, half Latin, half stage bravado, then slides down, upside down, hair brushing torch flames. When he lands unscathed, the collective exhale steams the rafters. Children launch foot-high jumps, copying the act until older siblings yank them down. Now, a rare treat. The troupe announces a shadow song, a proto-theatrical monologue delivered by lamplight silhouettes on a white sheet. The story depicts Charlemagne's paladins chasing a Moorish sorcerer. Behind the sheet, careful hand puppetry combined with lamp flicker paints boar chases and sword fights as thrilling as any castle tapestry. Scholars centuries later will analyze such proto-cinema. Tonight, peasants experience a dream stitched in firelight. Eventually, all narratives converge on the travelling life. A plaintive ballad describes a minstrel dying on the road, unshrouded save for patchwork cloak. Listeners hush, even the fool stills. The chorus, grant me no cold stone pillow nor priest's Latin drone, but fiddles echo under willow and earth for a throne. Villagers glance at relatives they buried last winter, frosty lumps beside the churchyard yew. Solidarity glues them to the drifter's lament. They understand being one bad harvest from wanderlust themselves. Food shared tonight feels like insurance if they ever need to swap rake for road. The show lasts 3 hours. By last curtain, throats rasp, palms burn from clapping, and the moon has climbed halfway to zenith. Troopers bow, invite final contributions, an onion here, a rabbit carcass there. They pass out souvenir ribbons cut from faded silk they found in a city dump. Tie it to your doorway, the singer says, and vagabonds will bless your flock. Superstition or savvy marketing, villagers oblige. After crowd disperses, troop members drag cart into an unlocked barn bay lent by a kindly herdsman. They deposit earnings, 6 loaves, 3 cheese wheels, 2 ham hocks, a sack of turnips, a jar of honey, 8 candles, 12 pennies, and the tanner's promised blue cheese. Enough to carry them to the next parish, 3 valleys south. They divvy goods according to unwritten code. Singer first, because his voice draws tears. Juggler next, because risk pays. Fool last, but guaranteed extra ale for bruises. They laugh about the steward's shocked face when the fool mimicked his stutter. They spot clean costumes, restring busted loot notes with sheep gut, and hang boots by the dying barn lantern. Because tomorrow pre-dawn they must push cart onward, the road's width their only guarantee of freedom. Wider culture tries periodically to leash such wanderers. Edward IV's Charter of the King's Minstrels, 1469, grants licensed guild players the right to confiscate instruments from unlicensed street performers. In London, a city already stuffed with craft monopolies, guild stewards stride Cheapside collecting fines, but countryside authorities rarely enforce paperwork. Who will chase a singing jester 3 counties over for lack of a badge? Sheriffs need archers, not lawsuits. Thus, the wooden cart circuit persists, twining market towns in an informal network of stories and news. At the opposite pole, noble courts compete to lure master performers. Henry VIII splurges on lutes, sackboots, and singers for Hampton Court. Francis I of France imports Italian commedia dell'arte troupes. These court minstrels enjoy velvet pay, but forfeit nomads' autonomy. Their ballads must flatter patrons, mock only approved targets, and skip jokes about royal mistresses. Meanwhile, wandering cousins lampoon whomever they please, trusting wheels and dusk to outrun offended gentry. Peasants prefer the irreverent variety. A courtier's polished rondo never lands as hard as a rustic verse about a sheriff losing hose while fleeing bees. The humour spirals low and rowdy, jokes about chamber pots, about monks loving geese, more than gospel, about the lord whose codpiece houses a mouse. The barn audience roars because laughter sidesteps feudal hierarchy, and minstrels provide that safety valve, mock the taxman at night, quietly acquiesce to tithes come dawn. Magic, music, news, satire. Each strand in the minstrel's braid serves survival. Villagers pay for levity, lords pay for prestige, clandestine messages slip inside recited verses. During wars, kings accuse minstrels of espionage, yet still hire them. Information is currency. A jongleur might carry word of troop movements disguised in the meter of a drinking song. One extra stressed syllable per line equals one platoon on the march. Legend? Perhaps, but governments act on suspicion, not certainty. More than once, a wandering piper vanishes in castle dungeons because his tune echoed border rumours, medieval football. The call to play could be nothing more than a shepherd's horn blown at the wrong bend of a valley, or a goatherd's boy galloping his shadow over ridges shouting, "Ball up! Ball up!" And within an hour, every lane, cart track, and rabbit trail between two parishes would churn with bodies converging on a makeshift midfield. No parchment posted on a tree spelled out kickoff. No village crier needed to recite bylaws because bylaws did not exist. The only rule everyone grasped in their bones was painfully simple. Get the ball, never more than a pig's bladder scraped clean, inflated through a goose quill, and knotted shut across terrain so wild it included hedgerows, wheat fields, creeks, orchards, peat bogs, and the occasional horrified kitchen garden, then jam it into the goal fixed somewhere behind enemy lines. Goalposts might be the lich gate of the opposing church, a manorial boundary stone, or an oak so ancient the druids whispered under it. The distance between those two markers often stretched 2, 3, sometimes 6 miles, and nobody in a linen shirt cared if half the route disappeared under rain-swollen mud. Medieval football didn't cancel for weather, it devoured weather and begged for seconds. The kick-off rarely looked ceremonious. One side, often the team hosting a Saint Day festival, would lob the bladder skyward, screaming a dialect war cry, half prayer, half insult. For a fraction of a second the ball shone like a pale moon. Then the cavalry hit, 36 men slamming, locking arms, knee-thrusting, hurling haymakers, any tactic short of blade work. Helmets? None. Shin guards? Wrong century. Boots? Hobnailed soles whose rigid edges could fillet a calf in a collision. Contemporary chroniclers struggling to find metaphors for the scene settled on animal imagery. It was a boar hunt where the boar kept changing owner. It was a riot shaped like a constellation. It was 2 storms colliding to birth a third made of elbows. Women watched from cottage doors yelling warnings when the scrum strayed too close to duck coops. Toddlers cheered for fathers and uncles, while clutching skirts tight enough to whiten knuckles. Monks travelling the road sometimes whispered psalms over black pewter rosaries because a single misstep could drag them into the vortex and spit them out minus a tooth. A helpful friar might even join the crush. Confessional records from Norfolk note one Frater Simon, charged with striking a Reeves man upon the jaw in your football game and causing 3 teeth to depart from his mouth. The abbess who held Simon's purse paid the fine, noting in margins that her chaplain's uppercut was soundly executed to the Lord's glory. Momentum governed strategy. Once the bladder nestled in your crook, the only maneuver was sprinting downhill like a stag on fire, while teammates formed a living wedge, absorbing kicks and hayforks. Tackles contrasted rugby's controlled breakdowns. Here you could shoulder charge a rival into a drainage ditch and claim Pax Vobiscum, if he still moved. Broken clavicles were so common that bone setters near Shrovetide, the preferred football season in England, prepared extra ash splints. Some matches bled into 2-day odysseys, the ball lodging overnight in thorn hedges while players limped home for salted pork, sleep, and a poultice, returning at dawn to reignite carnage. In Northumberland, one record describes a game lasting from cock crow of St. Matthias to evensong next day, traversing 3 parishes and the Watermead twice. By the finale, spectators lined ridge tops just to watch the dust plume move like a migrating beast. The violence scared civic governors more than blood spilled in taverns. Edward II tried a 1314 proclamation banning great-foot ballets inside London walls, calling them a public menace. No one listened. By 1363, Edward III, fresh from taxing the realm to fund campaigns in France, issued another edict denouncing handball, football, and idle games of no profit because they kept men from archery butts. Sheriffs collected a few symbolic kicks of chained prisoners but couldn't arrest entire villages. In 1388, Parliament repeated the ban. Peasants responded by pushing start times to twilight when sheriffs preferred hearths to field patrols. Two centres of learning allied with the Crown, Oxford in 1231, Cambridge in 1336. Each outlawed football among scholars, fearing lethal brawls that might bleed tuition revenue. Both campuses still recorded annual riots, the town and gown football fray, where gowns hurled Latin insults while townsmen hurled fists. One Oxford statute grudgingly allowed campus peeler, a tamer hybrid, provided students posted a bond equal to a donkey's market value for every match. The donkey metric signalled risk. Bruised scholars could cost as much as lost livestock. The church's position was complicated. Sermons thundered that football encouraged wrath, yet church calendars mapped the prime season. Matches clustered around pre-Lent Shrovetide because, said one parish priest, the devil loves a bruised bone before a holy fast. Some priests secretly loved the spectacle. A Kentish rector organised an annual clerics versus lay brothers showdown and wrote in parish rolls that proceeds from ale sold at half-time financed missile repairs. Popes never weighed in. They had crusades and heresies on their desks. Meanwhile, rural bishops quietly tried to keep matches at least one furlong from consecrated graveyards. Headstones were expensive. Medieval medicine had opinions bordering on admiration. The 15th century surgeon John of Ardern recommended the game to stir the humours in youths grown lazy from winter idleness, though he warned older players risked stray coughs of the spleen. Fracture manuals from Paris included a section on the football knee, prescribing goose grease and willow bark. Autopsy evidence is thin, but forensic teams analysing skeletons from Hambledon churn pits found patterned shin lesions and half-healed fibula snaps consistent with full-force kicks. Equipment was laughably minimal. The ball itself, sinew, tied pig bladder, cost nothing but time. Leather casings, proto-footballs, existed among wealthier parishes but popped quickly without a rubber bladder. Inflation happens by lung power. A strong lad might pass out after 3 minutes of huffing. Once knotted, the bladder bounced unpredictably, enabling underdogs. Any stumble could send the orb pin balling into a thicket for whoever reacted fastest. Uniforms didn't exist, so teams tied ribbons, yellow for Millfield, red for Stonecross. By half-time, most ribbons ripped loose, forcing players to memorize teammates' faces. Confusion multiplied injuries. Hand signals? Forget it. The roar drowned everything. The only vantage point with clarity was a hayloft or church steeple, and even there the swirling mass resembled two OKs fighting for a single bucket. Why did peasants risk life and limb? Glory, yes, but more tangibly, wages. Bets ranged from a clutch of eggs to an entire hog. Market records mention 1421 Y Fair, where the losing village owed 4 stones of eels to winners. Eels travelled well, doubling as protein and purse. Landlords sometimes sweetened the pot. A day's rent remission provided their tenants could humiliate rival estates. Such patronage turned matches into surrogate wars, fewer casualties, similar bragging rights. Community ritual piggy-backed on the chaos. Shrovetide matches opened carnival season. After bruises came pancakes, confession, ashes. Rarely did the same man carry bruises into Lent fasting, injuries healed with chickweed poultices and church grants, forgiving penance if play occurred in good humour. Oaths sworn mid-scrum by the limbs of St. Cuthbert Alscore did not count as blasphemy because mortal peril excused hot language. Across the Channel, France branded its variant La Soule. Norman villagers chased a stuffed leather ball rather than a bladder and sometimes wielded sticks, turning the mêlée into proto-hockey. Chronicles host glimpses. 1393 Amiens, soul match between butchers and fishmongers, ended when the butchers drove the ball through a tanner's storefront. The tanner sued, the guilds paid. Next year they barred sticks, substituting grappling belts. Injuries barely dipped. In Scotland, Orkney's Kirkwall Bar captured Christmas and New Year fervour. Fishermen, the Up the Gates, battled farmers, Doon the Gates, goals being Harbour Wall and Cathedral Wall respectively. Gameplay permitted headbutts and permitted drowning attempts in waist-deep harbour water. Everyone agreed drowning was fine unless the victim stayed under too long. Islanders to this day stage a sanitized version under police drones. Italy birthed calcio storico in Renaissance Florence, teams of 27 in silk breeches beating each other bloody within Piazza Santa Croce, punching, kicking, choking, then hurling a leather ball over a waist-high fence. Forwards and defenders? No, soldiers and grapplers. The Medici family adored the spectacle, using it to channel factional rivalry away from assassination attempts. 16th-century travel writers cross-pollinated rules. Some English matches adopted calcio grappling holds. Violence travelled as quickly as lace patterns. Attempts to civilize the sport began piecemeal. In 1581, Richard Mulcaster, headmaster of Merchant Taylors' School, penned positions praising football for exercise but urging modest, discreet, and skillful play. He recommended a smaller field, fewer players, and forbidden blows of extremity. His aspirational blueprint gathered dust until 19th-century public schools exhumed it. In between, law after law tried to muzzle the tradition. Each ban acknowledged fatalities. Coroner inquests list players kicked to death, throttled, or trampled so deep into mud they suffocated. Yet the game refused to die until transportation and topography changed. Enclosure acts walled off commons, laying hedges across age-old routes. Railway embankments bisected old courses. Turnpike trusts lobbied for safety. They wanted toll-paying coaches unmolested by stampeding mobs. Parliament answered with the 1835 Highways Act, making it an offence to obstruct passage by any football or other pastime. Fines stung more in industrial economies where wages could be garnished. Simultaneously, public schools codified their sanitized versions, rugby and association football, reducing sides to 11, confining the pitch, outlawing maim tactics. Industrial workers migrated to cities, swapped moorland marathons for Saturday fixtures enclosed by white chalk, and paid a shilling to watch instead of risk tibius. Industrial whistle-time discipline hammered the coffin. Factory foremen wouldn't tolerate men limping in after a 2-day, Shrovetide slugfest. Casualty hospitals overflowed already with loom accidents. Insurance syndicates refused payouts for injuries sustained in rural riot. Workers shifted to betting on local club matches. Blood still spilled. Early FA Cup finals saw broken jaws, but referees arrived wing-collared, brandishing whistles rather than cudgels. Still, echoes of medieval chaos ripple under modern chants. Pitch invasions after last-minute winners reuse the ancient stampede. Fan derbies replicate village pride with dialect insults echoing 14th-century mockeries. The ball bladder got rubber and valve, but its unpredictability remains gospel. Ask any goalkeeper watching a deflected strike wobble like a punctured pig's balloon. Rule books ballooned, yet players still dive two-footed, echoing ancestors kneeing rivals into ditches. Shrovetide matches survive in pockets. Ashbourne's Royal Shrovetide in Derbyshire, Workington's Uppies and Downies, all under police watch, paramedics on standby, drones filming. Leather balls replace bladders. Teams expand to entire towns. Tourists gawk. Local lads still lose teeth. One Downey joked on BBC, "We cancelled gym memberships, bar gives better bruises." Councils debate bans, heritage boards argue culture. The scuffle endures because bruises fade quicker than legends. What did the medieval player feel mid-scrum? Adrenaline thicker than pottage, a roar that made ears ring, a collective exorcism of winter stagnation. The pig bladder, slick with mud and maybe blood, symbolized luck. Hold it, and for 5 heartbeats you were a village hero. Lose it, and you chase redemption across hedges until legs seize. Evening's ale tasted sharper off a victory, saltier after defeat. Wives scolded but secretly admired the swollen knuckles. Children traced scars as nighttime story prompts. Physically, the game doubled as boot camp. A man who survived 5 Shrovetide seasons wielded stamina that dwarfed his ploughing capacity. Lords quietly approved. Peasant fitness served armies. When English yeomen at Agincourt loosed longbow power, some credit belonged to lungs built sprinting bladder balls over mire, thighs hardened, shoving scrums through ditches. The ball itself fatized memory. After a win, victors sometimes soaked the bladder in brine and hung it in the alehouse. A shriveled relic resembling a deflated pumpkin dangled from rafters, a conversation piece for 11 months until the next carnival. Children petted it for luck, old men spat on it claiming they scored the winning jab decades earlier. A tanner in 1478 willed his team's famous bladder to the parish church to hang in the porch as testimony of our faith and vigour. The priest accepted, perhaps amused by theology wrapped in pigskin. If you could time travel to a 14th century match, senses would overload first. Iron scent of blood mixing with trampled chamomile, bray of free-range sheep scattering, crunch of bone-hitting cart rung, squeal of inflated bladder bursting then patched mid-game. Soundtrack? Half Gregorian chant drifting from distant church, half curses creative enough to make devils blush. Colour palette? Earth browns, hedge greens, sudden arterial reds. The ball's journey looked less like sport than ritual sacrifice, weirdly collective, strangely consensual. Everyone knew someone might die. Everyone played anyway, because risk gave meaning to a winter slog of turnips, tithes, and tithe evasion. By modern safety metrics, the game rates are unacceptable, but soccer's global passion carries ghost DNA. Slide tackles echo leg sweeps in hedgerow mud. The offside rule tames what used to be ambush. VAR replays impose clerical oversight, where once only the local alewife arbitrated quarrels by pouring or withholding pints. And still, last-minute winners ignite mobs that crash barriers, reenacting medieval bedlam sanitized by plastic seating. Artifacts testify, dig under former village greens and you may find pig bones pierced by quill tips, leather straps with iron eyelets used to encase early bladders, and the occasional bent knife pried from soil. Evidence that not every no-weapons gentleman's agreement held. Museum curators display these alongside shiny FIFA trophies. Visitors connect dots across 600 years of mud, muscle, and mania. Ultimately, medieval football died because the landscape changed, hedgerows fattened, commons parcelled, turnpikes policed, industrial whistles regimented hours, and printed rulebooks civilized chaos. But the soul of the game, boundary-erasing melee chasing an unpredictable sphere, just traded pig bladders for vulcanized rubber, ditch brawls for penalty boxes. Next time a derby erupts, imagine that thrashing mass spilling out of a 14th century orchard, and acknowledge every modern chant, tackle, and bruised shin carries a dim echo of peasants who, with zero rules and maximum appetite for risk, invented a pastime too wild to survive unchanged yet too potent to die. Sex. A midsummer dusk slides over the thatched village like warm broth, and the day's final chores, raking dung, penning geese, trundling the last water barrel from the brook, wind down in a hush that promises something sweeter than rest. Work has devoured every hour of daylight, but night belongs to the senses, and no pastime beckons more insistently than sex. It costs no coin, requires no permits, rewards the body with pleasure, and the farm with eventual extra labor in the shape of infants who will one day weed flax and scare rooks. In an economy forever balancing on the edge of shortage, coupling is equal parts entertainment and pragmatic investment. If 3 goats, 2 pigs, and a patch of rye cannot guarantee next winter's survival, perhaps another pair of hands will tip the scale. Most peasants occupy a single-room cottage, packed earth floor, smoke hole above a central hearth, door barred by a horizontal timber at dusk. Parents, toddlers, and often grandparents share a communal pallet of straw, bracken, and any spare woolen rags. Privacy is a rare luxury. Curtains appear only in the homes of reeves or millers, but erotic opportunity thrives under proximity. Children, lulled by fatigue and the white noise of livestock breathing beyond the wall, drift into sleep while adult bodies calibrate to one another's warmth. A quick fumble beneath blankets woven from undyed wool can unfold without disturbing the toddler curled like a cat at his mother's knees. If the child does stir, parents murmur a lullaby, the same tune they heard as infants while similar motions rocked the straw. Church doctrine demands marital chastity except for procreation and labels premarital intercourse fornication, yet parish registers betray doctrine's practical eclipse. Court depositions from Yorkshire, Norfolk and the Languedoc routinely mention brides already pregnant when exchanging vows. Historians tally baptism records against wedding bans and find the ratio of conceptions preceding matrimony hovers near 1 in 3. Village priests thunder warnings from pulpits, citing Augustine and Jerome, but peasants interpret sin through a sliding scale that weighs spiritual peril against human need. Pregnancy can force a reluctant father to marry or compel families to release contested dowries. A bump under the bride's kirtle by no means disqualifies her. It may even assure skeptical in-laws that a new labourer is guaranteed. Sex before marriage weaves into seasonal courtship rituals. At May Day, young men roam door to door, bringing in the green by planting hawthorn branches above thresholds. A sprig trimmed with ribbons signals romantic interest. Its acceptance invites nighttime conversation that often escalates. Witnesses in manorial courts decry night walking, but judges rarely impose harsh fines so long as coupling leads to bans within a month or two. A proverb whispers that best to test the mare before paying the stud fee, reflecting pragmatic regard for fertility in a world where childlessness can doom a holding. The famous droit du seigneur, the right of a lord to deflower vassal brides, enters popular imagination centuries later, likely through 18th century Romanticism and Victorian moralizing. Medieval legal roles reveal no pattern of such claims. Manor records do note merchet, a fee paid when a serf's daughter marries outside the lord's domain, but that charge compensates for lost labour, not licensed bedroom assault. Folklorists tracing the myth back usually land on post-feudal dramatists seeking villains. Real peasants feared many abuses, unfair tithes, grazing fines, arbitrary tallage, but not ceremonial defloration. Inside cottages, extended families foster matter-of-fact attitudes toward sexuality. Children cannot ignore the muffled rhythms 5 feet away. Curiosity sparks early, and parents field questions with blunt analogies about planting seeds. A mother sharpening sickles might remark that babies grow in a woman as wheat grows under soil, given rain and good ploughing. The Catholic Church's confessional manuals strive to separate innocent ignorance from mortal sin. Ironically, these manuals serve as sex education for confessors who grill peasants on deeds the laity may never have imagined. Tales circulate of priests dictating forbidden positions, inadvertently inspiring experimentation. Even so, genuine shame flares around adultery, not least because a bastard strains communal resources. Parish poor relief, funded by tithes, feeds fatherless infants, thus neighbours police fidelity. A Hayward catching lovers in a barley stook might turn a blind eye, if both are unmarried, but will haul adulterers before the bishop's court. Punishments vary: public penance in a church nave wearing a smock inside out, a modest fine, or pilgrimage to a local shrine as spiritual damage control. Stocks and whippings enter only when scandal endangers social peace, say when 2 rival families draw knives over disputed paternity. Medieval contraception exists, though patchy. Women whisper recipes, wild carrot seed chewed after Congress, pennyroyal tea, jump splashes into cold ponds to shock the womb. Midwives, half revered and half feared, keep herb gardens bristling with tansy, rue, and betony. The Church condemns poisons that thwart conception, but tacitly tolerates spacing children by breastfeeding, which can delay ovulation. Spousal periodic abstinence, known as calendar days, takes cues from lunar cycles, but in practice relies on agricultural demands. During harvest, exhaustion overrides libido. Venereal disease, though less rampant than in later centuries of global trade, still hacks at communal health. Leprosy's disfiguring lesions carry sexual stigma, even though transmission routes differ. The truly feared affliction is the burning, likely a cluster of gonorrhea-like infections. Treatment combines penitential fasting, pain as proof of spiritual rot, with topical balms of frankincense and vinegar. Some priests preach that contraction proves divine punishment for fornication. Sufferers, desperate, bribe relic shrines, hoping a saint's fingerbone can cool their loins. Beds, when present, are heirlooms, timber frames roped with braided cords supporting a straw-tick mattress. Wealthier peasants throw a feather bolster on top, raising lovers 2 feet above hungry rats. Yet for most, the floor pallet suffices. Sex there weds urgency with caution. No one wants to slam into stone hearths or tip earthenware. Winter drives coupling indoors. Summer invites it to haylofts, riverbanks, taboo corners of the churchyard. After Vespers, moonlit grass becomes a second mattress, though lovers risk night air, blamed for agues and the prickly menace of hedgehogs. Pregnancy alters labour calculus. During planting and harvest, expectant women still bend over furrows until belly weight forbids. After birth, confinement lasts maybe a week. Soon the mother slings baby in a wool shawl and heads back to Bean Rose. Nursing occurs on the go. Medieval medical texts advise mothers to avoid onions, lest milk sour. Onion fields nevertheless resound with infants' sighs. Women pregnant most years of their fertile lives navigate sex as both joy and hazard. Husbands sometimes withdraw to spare wives' ovulation, but a Randy Carter may override caution with mead warmth. Domestic arguments rattle thatched roofs. Neighbours pretend deafness until voices spike, then intervene with ale jugs or blunt witticisms. Harder to harvest if you plough the field too soon. Despite theological disclaimers, erotic art wriggles into culture. Marginalia in psalters depict monks chasing naked nuns, rabbits mounting hounds, visual jokes encoding carnality in holy books. Carvers hide phallic gargoyles beneath misericords where only choir boys crouching during liturgy might notice. Pilgrims buy pewter badges shaped like vulvas crowned as queens, talismans for fertility. The same church that quells street plays featuring bawdy humour sells indulgence certificates to repentant lovers. Double revenue flows from pleasure and its guilt. Folk festivals push boundaries further. At midsummer, bonfires light hilltops, couples leap flames hand in hand, screaming fertility blessings. Local superstition claims sparks ignite wombs. Beltane in Celtic fringes sees greenwood marriages, year-long trial unions consummated in fern beds. A year later, either party may walk away free. Any child born remains legitimate under custom. Church courts object, but remote glens outpace diocesan reach. Shame intensifies not from carnality itself, but from property anxiety. A plough-bond man is worth his weight in rye. A daughter's chastity shores up alliance negotiations. Should she conceive outside wedlock, her entire household forfeits leverage. Dowry shrinks, suitors withdraw. Thus fathers monitor daughters at festivals, employing married aunts as chaperones. Yet illicit passion finds cracks. A Saxon chronicle tells of lovers exchanging pomegranate seeds, imported luxury, symbolizing hidden sweetness. Parish gossips decode such tokens. Soon everyone knows whose daughter nibbles foreign fruit. Lull periods between planting and harvest grant sexual license. Winter's long nights encourage segmented sleep bouts with a waking interlude ripe for intimacy. Bodies warmed by hay, stuffed bedding shrug off frost by friction. Couples experiment, standing to avoid straw spears, side by side to hush squeaks or, if possessed of rare carpentry, on benches patched with fleece. Orgasms slip under church radar. Priests seldom demand posture details at confession, focusing instead on marital status and frequency. Unless one seeks annulment, bedroom specifics rarely surface. The clergy themselves are not immune. Despite vows, parish priests father children at observable rates. Bishops issue periodic crackdowns, but fines and penitential pilgrimages supply diocesan coffers, while clerical concubines continue baking altar wafers. Villagers shrug. A priest who keeps a good garden and brews decent church ale can fornicate discreetly without losing parish respect. Hypocrisy complaints rise only if he increases tithes to pay for fine linen for his mistress. Public punishments occasionally puncture erotic latitude. Adulterous women might endure ducking, seated on a wooden stool and dunked into river water, though many duckings target scolds rather than lovers. Men cuckolding a lord could face branding or castration, cruel reminders of property relations underlying marriage contracts. Yet the average peasant, cocooned by poverty, too humble to excite elite jealousy, seldom fears extreme retribution. Economy trumps morality. Children absorb the omnipresence of sex, but learn etiquette by osmosis. Boys join plough teams by 12, hear ploughmen quip about mares in heat, and imitate swagger. Girls fetch water from brooks, giggling about which lad has shoulders wide enough to yoke. Courtship may involve anonymous love tokens, a carved spoon left on a windowsill, or a posy of cow parsley tied with flax thread. When tokens align, nighttime visits follow. The phrase bundling appears in later centuries, yet its core custom, couples lying clothed under supervision, exploring erotic friendship, likely roots in medieval practice. Families treat premarital fondling as inevitable. What matters is publicly sealing the pair with banns before swelling bellies embarrass kin. Devotional culture repackages corporeality in mystical language. Female saints like Catherine of Siena speak of Christ as celestial bridegroom. Erotic metaphors slide into sermons, giving the faithful permission to consider bodily yearnings within sacred frameworks. Laypeople chant bride mysticism, hymns at evening devotions. The line between spiritual ecstasy and physical arousal blurs. Monks copy manuals on ecstatic prayer, advising posture, breath control, repetition, a medieval cousin to tantric practice. Illiterate ploughmen overhear bits of this theology during rogation processions and twist it into barnyard puns, but the underlying message, that desire can be holy, seeps into popular consciousness. Childbirth, the tangible outcome of casual pleasure, unfolds hazardous yet communal. Women labour on straw near the hearth, crouching or supported by a birthing stool's crescent cutout. Men banished from the cottage hover at thresholds clutching rosaries and flasks of ale. Midwives chant psalms interlaced with folk charms, tying red wool to wrists to ward off demons. If delivery succeeds, a celebratory churching meal follows 30 days later. If it fails, the stillborn infant receives emergency baptism, then burial in unconsecrated ground behind the ewe. Grief ripples, yet life rumbles on. Within weeks, the couple may couple again. Survival hinges on replacement. Contraception failures yield corroded solutions, abandoning infants at monastery doors, a practice monks half tolerate as spiritual charity. Foundling roles in Venetian and Burgundian houses skyrocket during grain shortages. English counterparts rely more on informal fostering, childless aunts, itinerant entertainers needing apprentices. These safety valves soften judgment on out-of-wedlock births, cementing sexual lenience. Epidemics shift dynamics drastically. Post-Black Death labor shortages empower survivors to demand better terms. As wages rise, marriage ages fall. Adolescents wed earlier, accelerating sexual rhythms. Authorities, alarmed by perceived licentiousness, commission moral tracts linking plague to fornication. Flagellant movements sprout, preaching asceticism. Yet once mortality ebbs, villages revert. The libido seldom obeys edicts. Historians mining manorial rolls discover astonishing detail in defamation suits. One woman accuses a neighbor of calling her a mare ridden by all men under crescent moon. The insult implies promiscuity, damaging market reputation. She sues for slander and wins a bushel of rye as reparations. Another suit features a man publicly labeling a rival's daughter half-widowed before wedding, i.e. already pregnant. Court forces him to apologize on knees before church porch. These proceedings reveal social lines, fornication tolerated until it threatens economic alliances. Artisan guilds encode sexual commentary in pageant plays. The York Cycle's Fall of the Angels casts devils prancing with oversized phallus props. The audience cackles, children shriek delight, yet moral of the story lands, hubris damns. Robin Hood, legends elevate sexually autonomous maid Marian, twirling quarterstaff, unwed but respected. Such narratives recycle subversive eros into community mythology. Lord of Misrule. The morning frost still grips the hedgerows when the manor steward drags the ale barrel podium into the village green and bangs a ladle against its rim, summoning every household within earshot. Children in birch bark clogs hop from foot to foot, puffing tiny clouds into the air. while their parents arrange themselves in a ragged semicircle, mothers with arms folded against the chill, fathers straightening jerkins grown shiny at the elbows. A single parchment sheet dangles from the steward's fist, the roster of names eligible to ascend, for one delirious rotation of the sun, to the impossible dignity of the Lord of Misrule. Written in charcoal are farmhands, dairymaids, widowed cottagers, and the miller's gangling son, no tenant, exempt, save the reeve, whose grim office forbids revelry. By unspoken agreement, the local lord stands back near his liveried guards, cloak furred with miniver, because while the ritual needs his blessing, it gains half its spark from temporarily knocking his likeness off the village totem pole. The steward clears his throat, recites a blessing that splices Latin phrases with rustic dialect, then plunges a gloved hand into a wooden bowl filled with hazel twigs, each twig scored with a name. The crowd stills so suddenly that a distant crow's caw rings like a trumpet. Out lifts a single strip, damp where his fingers tremble. Maud Carter of Town End, the shriek that follows detonates through the green, sheep penned by the smithy bolt sideways, the crow flaps off, and Maud herself, 30, freckled, normally invisible under the weight of 4 small children, drops her bucket so hard the handle snaps. Within seconds she is hoisted shoulder high by neighbours who yesterday would have passed her without a nod. Someone unrolls a robe assembled months prior by the village sewing circle, alternating triangles of scarlet, indigo, and nauseous pea-green, stitched from cloth offcuts scavenged across 4 parishes. They drape it around her smock. It smells of cedar shavings and distant candle smoke. A garland woven from holly, ivy, and dried marigolds descends onto Maud's hair. Cowbells pilfered from the manor dairy and polished with ash and spit, strapped to her ankles so each step rings a silvery jangle. The fool of last year, now relieved of rank, hands over the ornamental bauble a wooden spoon painted gold and tipped with a possum's tail dyed crimson. Maud seizes it as if born to sceptre, and with a grin nobody has seen in years, intones her first decree: "Let ovens burn all day, for no belly shall grumble while I rule." Laughter drowns protest from the baker, who instantly calculates how much flour the edict will cost him. Carnival arithmetic favours emotion over ledger books. By mid-morning the green has transformed. Informal stalls mushroom, one hawking candied hazelnuts, another ladling warm ale thick with extra malt. A pair of mendicant friars travelling to Advent preaching in the next shire pause on the lane, sniff spice on the breeze, and decide the salvation of these souls can tolerate a brief delay. They drift into the crowd, palms open for arms, and are promptly dragooned by Maud. "You, brothers, shall be our heavenly choir, sing loud and sing bawdy." The younger blushes but shrugs. A day of licensed irreverence threatens no mortal confession. Noon approaches, and Maud proceeds to the church, bells on ankles clanging liturgical counterpoint. Though the church frowns on misrule, the priest greets her with theatrical courtesy. He knows community pressure kindly outweighs canon law for 24 sanctioned hours. She dances the central aisle, kneels at the altar in her motley, and requests Mass for all souls slogging beneath the ploughshare. The priest obliges with a brisk liturgy, choirboys snickering behind humpbacked psalters. When the final amen fades, Maud rises and proclaims remission of petty sins, lateness to dawn prayers, swearing at oxen, watering ale. Parishioners cheer, partly at the absolution, partly at the novelty of a woman swinging the moral gavel. Back outside, she commandeers the tithe barn for the banquet hall. Villagers haul trestle tables, line them with trenchers hacked from stale bread loaves, stack them high with anything edible, gleaming apples rescued from winter storage pits, twists of venison jerky, wheels of half-cured cheese, jars of pickled beet, and robust loaves baked from tomorrow's flour ration. The steward grumbles about depleting stores, but the lord, half amused, waves off the worry. Carnival requires spectacle, and the harvest was generous this year. Musicians arrive, 2 itinerant pipers, a blind hurdy-gurdy crank, and a drummer whose instrument is more dent than brass. Payment is guaranteed in leftover goose and a corner of hayloft later. They would have played anyway, because a good Lord of Misrule feast is marketing gold. They launch into riffs that sound like fishwives arguing in Phrygian mode. Children whirl until dizziness flings them among hay bales. Mothers pretend to scold, then join, skirts flashing striped undershifts. Among the swirl, a timid widower and the Reeves half-sister share a cautious spin that will blossom, come spring, into bands. The day's heart is Maud's progress of devastation, her court's parodic parade through each household to confiscate taxes of eggs, beer, or oddities. At the smithy, she commandeers a half-forged horseshoe, dubs it her official seal, and stamps it into a round of cheese. At the cooperage, she snatches a hoop, crowns a lamb, then pardons the lamb for bleating during solemn pronouncements. Each stop features improvised punishments. The miller, famous for short, waiting flour sacks, must stand on a stool and declare his sacks now so honest they'll sprout wings and sing hymns. Everyone howls. The miller buys goodwill with almond comfits. By dusk, the procession returns to the tithe barn, torches fluttering in the damp air, sparks trailing like newborn constellations. Inside, the feast erupts. A pig, roasted on a spit, carved from ash tree crackles, skin blistered to mahogany. Dishes of pottage flavoured with leeks float down the table. Trenchers fill, then vanish. Church ale appears, stronger than everyday brew, steeped in rosemary, potent enough to foul memory. Revellers quaff till their laughs slip an octave. Maud, from her throne fashioned of ale, barrels stacked and swathed in sackcloth dyed purple, samples every platter, wipes grease on robe triangles, and bangs her bauble for silence. Silence doesn't arrive. Instead, a cascade of challenges erupts. A juggling contest judged by a one-eyed shepherd, a limerick duel between the schoolmaster and the goose girl, an impromptu wrestling bout where the blacksmith pins the reeve in straw amid cheers. The friars reappear to lead a psalm intentionally mangled into double entendres. Each stanza ends with, "Amen, say the hens, amen," prompting clucking imitations so loud they drown the drummer. Mid-banquet, a hush spontaneously forms as Maud rises holding a loaf and knife. She carves a slice, salts it, and walks to the poorest widow, seating her at high table. The symbolic solidarity elicits tears. Tomorrow the two may barely exchange words, but tonight they share the same bowl of stewed pears, sprinkled with cinnamon, hoarded for months. The reprieve from scarcity also breeds critique. Satire skews dangerous, stage lighting grievances usually whispered. A mason leaps on a bench, recites a mock sermon about stone towers collapsing under graft. Villagers cackle but side-eye the steward. The lord, sipping diluted mead at the fringes, chuckles, aware this staged sedition bleeds venom from real revolt. Misrule functions as pressure valve, and he will pay the price in coppers and pride to keep barns unburned come spring. Near midnight, Maud decrees the dance of utter foolishness. Participants must don garments backwards and link ankles with hemp so the chain serpents between hay bales, while musicians accelerate tempo to lunatic speed. Half the village tumbles, laughter becomes a shared oxygen. Injuries prove minor, one sprained wrist, a bruise where the blacksmith collided with ale tun, and ale pours over soreness. Carnival absolves Hazzard, or rather transmutes it into memory fodder. Next, ploughing season, tales of the backwards dance will lighten furrow monotony. Outside, sparks drift skyward like errant souls. The remaining woodpile shrinks, drafts knife through plank gaps, yet no one feels cold beneath ale's molten blanket. A minstrel cues a ballad of King Arthur's court, twisting legend so motley that Guinevere emerges as ale-wife and Merlin as cuckolded fishmonger. Historical fidelity collapses under comedic improvisation. The barn vibrates with stomps until lanterns wobble, their tallow blazing rivers down glassless panes. Approaching dawn, Maud knows her reign must end precisely. Inversion holds meaning because it is bounded. An orb flung sky-high is thrilling only if it falls back to a known world. She stands, robe a ruin of grease shadows, garland wilted, bells dulled by straw dust. She bangs gilt spoon to barrel and pronounces last edicts, leftover food to be portioned for households with scant larder, fines levied on cheapskates, forgiven if they match cheapskate behaviour with good cheer. Everyone to sleep till second cock crow. Then she relinquishes sceptre to the last Lord of Misrule, who stores it in a church crypt next to candle stubs and defunct processional dragon heads, relics awaiting resurrection next year. A small escort walks her to the frozen village well. Tradition demands symbolic purification. The Lord turned peasant again, sips icy water cupped in both hands, letting a few drops slide along robe seams as offering to spirits of hierarchy. Bells jingle faintly. With that, power evaporates. She is Maud the Carter once more, needed at dawn to mend harness straps, breastfeed the baby, and trade gossip about whose kisses tasted of rosemary ale. With sunrise pale across stubbled fields, barn doors creak on hesitant hinges, swollen-headed revellers drift home. They cross paths with apprentices, stomping to morning chores, exchanging sheepish nods. The steward inventories depleted stores, the Lord pockets lessons about discontent, disguised as farce. The priest snuffs guttering candles, scraping tallow for recasting into respectable Sunday tapers. Children asleep on rush mats dream of inverted worlds where geese lecture and grandmothers juggle candlesticks. Those dreams will outshine any Christmas sermon. Over the 16th century, such scenes bend under reformist scrutiny. Puritan pamphleteers condemn the memory as lewd bacchanalia, arguing that riot begets heresy. Henry VIII's 1541 proclamation crystallizes opposition. Divers vain disguisings, and in especial naming him Lord of Misrule, be utterly suppressed. Some parishes comply under fear of royal fine. Others conduct shadow revels beyond watchful constables, rebranding the rite Starlight Feast or Yule Moon Frolic. By Elizabeth's reign, Misrule survives mostly within noble courts, scripted entertainments starring expensive fools, velvet motley, tame mockery directed at foreign princes rather than local injustices. The valve narrows. Tensions find darker outlets in enclosures, riots, and witchcraft panics. Ice skating. A raw moon slides across the black winter sky like a knife on slate while the village wakes to a hush, so clear the crack of a single pond reed echoes all the way to the mill. In these deep weeks of the Little Ice Age, the very air feels crystalline, glazed, as if God himself has hammered a mirror over every stream, mill pond, and flooded pasture. Dawn has not yet pinked the ridge, but children tumble from straw ticks already wearing wool caps and fingerless mitts. They know what the adults know. Ice is not merely frozen water, but a second harvest, one of motion, laughter, and, if fortune smiles, secret courtship behind white breath. And so a pilgrimage begins down silvered cart ruts toward the pond, a flat sheet the size of 3 commons stitched together, where the first clinks of bone against ice spark like flint. The oldest boy in the parish leads the procession, a skinny reed of 15 whose skates are nothing more than polished ox metatarsi drilled with twin holes. Thongs of cured sheep gut lash each bone to his battered turn shoes. He walks stiff-legged onto the pond's lip, driving a willow pole through the first skim of snow, testing thickness by the hollow thrum it sings back. Satisfied, he sprints. The contact is at once whisper and roar. Whisper because the bone's flat underside glides almost frictionless, roar because nearby ice vibrates, transmitting his weight in starry fractures that trace under the surface like saints' relic veins. He plants the pole, shoves, and shoots across the mirror, scarf flagging like a banner, yowling the kind of whoop that makes dogs tilt their heads in wonder. One by one, the others follow. No 2 pairs of skates match. A girl of 12 wears shredded leather soles pierced by goat tibias sharpened to a crude edge. A thatcher has stitched deerskin boots onto flat blades carved from horse cannon bone. The village priest, robe tucked into belt, sports the fanciest equipment in sight. Wooden runners tipped with thin strips of iron that glint fox silver in first light. He won the pair last Martinmas in a theological wager with a visiting friar who claimed Aristotle banned sports among clerics. The priest argued Augustine's City of God allowed divertimento honestum and collected the blades as prize. It is rumoured he tries penance later by fasting, but on ice he looks anything but penitent, knees pumping, cassock, billowing. Early skating lives at this crossroad between need and joy. Farmers use frozen streams as highways, hauling sledges of firewood across surfaces that in summer demand a 2-mile detour. Women push baskets of wool toward fulling mills too waterlogged for carts. A lone peddler strapped to elk-bone skates skims 30 miles in a day, outpacing even a royal courier on horseback, hampered by drifts. Yet the very convenience of travel spawns play. Once chores pause, bones fly for speed alone. Ice games emerge spontaneously. The figure-8 contest is favourite. Players carve their symbol as wide as a cottage, and judges, usually the no-nonsense widows who brew ale, inspect the loops for symmetry. A perfect 8 earns a mug of warm, small beer. A wobble condemns the skater to fetch fresh rushes for church floor mats. Another pastime borrows from jousting. 2 skaters plant willow poles like lances, push straight toward each other, and at the last instant aim to unbalance the rival. Since collisions risk cracked ribs, onlookers braid straw shields around torsos to soften impact. When a rib does crack, Folk Remedy orders a wrap of boiled comfrey leaves, slipped under linen, and 3 nights of sleeping propped on goose down. The injured never skip the next freeze. The lure is too potent. Historians prying into peat bogs discover these antiquities by the dozen. At Flag Fen, an archaeologist lifted a centuries-old skate still laced to a shoe sole, leather shrunken but intact. In York's Coppergate dig, 23 animal bone runners surfaced alongside a child's wooden toy horse, testimony that skating was a family event as much as adult exploitation. Radiocarbon pins some to the 9th century, others to the 14th, proving the technology runs long. Each bone shows identical wear: groove-polished dead center, shoulders hacked, flat by adze, toe shaved to a slight taper so the blade lifts at the stride's end, preventing dig that would pitch the skater forward. Bone suffices until around 1300, when Dutch marsh folk, lords of dyke and canal, experimented with wood runners shod in iron. A blacksmith in Gouda hammers wrought strips onto maple planks, bolts them with rivets, and unwittingly rewrites winter. Iron bites so little into ice it allows edges, edges allow curves, curves birth the wonder called the Dutch roll, a lateral push and glide that multiplies speed. Pilgrims sampling canal routes tell English traders of astonishing races where men skate beside windmill sails, keeping even for 3 full rotations. A Kentish wheelwright brings home 1 pair, then another. Price equals a month's corn, but ambition climbs. Wealthier yeomen purchase sets, and soon village ponds host mixed classes, bone runners hugging straight lines, while iron blades carve arabesques. Inevitably, hierarchy creeps in. Lords fence off ornamental lakes as private rinks. A steward in velvet strides to mid-ice, declares commons closed, and posts hefty fines. Yet peasants adapt. They exploit shallow meres beyond manor domain. They cut breathing holes for fish, then enlarge them into practice ovals. They freeze flooded meadows where court patrols refuse to slog. Winter democratizes geography. Ice imposes flats where hills stood, levels property lines under glass, and for a season grants poachers and squire equal footing, until spring cracks the mirror and privilege reasserts mud. Technique spawns culture. Manuals emerge from unexpected quarters. A monastic scribe in Utrecht annotates a psalter margin with stick figure sketches demonstrating push turns. He labels one pose crux reversed, legs X crossed, perhaps punning on religious iconography. Later, a Scottish laird compiles a chapbook, The Pleasant Art of Skating, lionizing the bravery of skating across tidal firths before dawn to snatch barrels of brandy from French smugglers. His diagrams include obligatory warnings about thin ice halos, a milky bloom signaling water within 2 inches of surface. Nonetheless, thrill outweighs caution. Smugglers and customs alike dash across margins while gulls wheel overhead. At the village level, equipment birthrights divide further. Iron remains costly, wood even scarcer where forests fell to fuel monasteries. Bones, however, drop from every slaughtering season. Children graduate from sheep fibulas to goat metatarsi, ends chewed by dogs until polished. Thongs upgrade from untreated rawhide, brittle, smelly, to tanned straps salvaged when a sole detaches from father's field shoe. The dream of iron persists. A newly betrothed couple might negotiate one luxury. She grants 2 extra chickens in dowry if he pledges to forge her iron tip runners by 3rd winter. Songs spin around such promises. In one ballad, a swain vows blades of brightest pewter, nonsense metal for ice, and loses a girl to a rival who offers genuine iron and a herring barrel filled with salt. Despite equipment disparity, ice fosters social mixing rare in feudal order. A squire's daughter, ankles laced in Dutch imports, slaloms past Hayward's son on bone, yet wind reddens both cheeks the same. A slip drops them sprawling, laughter dissolves rank. Courtship flares in these collisions. Many January betrothal traces to a shared spill near the pond's rotting alder stump. The priest knows his marriage register spikes 9 months post-freeze. Late winter warmth complicates bliss. When day highs flirt with thaw, a gun-shot crack can spiderweb surface without warning. Villagers post a listening sentinel, usually oldest grandfather with ears sharp as frost. At first pop he bellows and skaters scramble. Yet risk converts to sport. Daring youths linger, testing courage as cracks race. Occasionally courage fails to outrun physics. Man plunges waist-deep, tearing bone blades free, shrieking as frigid water bites. Companions form a chain with poles and belts, haul him out, drag to bank, strip soaked wool, and rub limbs until colour returns. 1 in 50 times lungs drown before help. The priest recites Psalm 69 amid snowfall, body interred by candlelit vigil attended in skates, a solemn reminder the mirror can swallow those too enamoured by reflection. The priest himself uses ice as a missionary highway. On feast days he skates 3 parishes to say multiple masses, his cassock hitched above calves, sanctuary bell dangling from belt. He carries a wooden box of consecrated wafers, trusting God that speed plus cold preserves their sanctity. At winter's height he visits homebound invalids unreachable by cart, a flask of spiced wine thawing under arm. His journal later testifies to prayers murmured mid-glide, Ave Maria time to breaths, claiming the pond amplifies chant like cathedral acoustics. Commerce smells opportunity. In Flanders, traders lash skates to carts, convert canals into corridor bazaars. One merchant sells eel pies mid-ice, another peddles ribbons stiff as boards, a third tunes guitars for copper coins. English clothiers mimic by spreading dyed broadcloth over frozen rivers, flaunting hues to passing gentry. A Cambridge scholar writes of purchasing Aristotle folios from a peddler sliding bookshelf on sledges. The phrase ice market enters port ledgers. Artists immortalize scenes. Dutch painter Hendrik Averkamp dabs miniature skaters onto winter panoramas, peasants, burghers, stray dogs, even a corpse sliding under a rescue line. Unseen are bones, they paint well under glaze, but patrons prefer romance of steel, glimmering. Illuminated manuscripts before show margins of knights on ice wearing knee-length mail. Probably fantasy, but fantasy sells. Storytelling. The year could be 1287, 1431, or 1520. It barely matters, because by the time winter darkness caps the thatched roofs of any European village, the scene repeats itself with watch-like fidelity. A whip of sleet rattles shutterboards, the pig in the corner pen complains, and 24 neighbours crowd a one-room cottage that smells of turnip stew and damp wool. They angle benches and 3-legged stools around the hearth so tight that knees interlock like barrel staves and every cough ricochets from wattle walls. One place alone remains unobstructed, a hard-packed patch of earth between soot-black rafters and fire-dog shadows. That empty circle is stage, pulpit, news desk, and window to the unreachable world, for into it steps the storyteller, and when he coughs for silence, even the Reeves lantern dares not swing. He isn't a minstrel in silk with a harp, though the 2 guilds share ancestry. His cloak is a spliced quilt of pilgrimage badges card as felt, and the sort of coarse linen used to wrap cheese. He travels alone because a single tongue outruns any troop and splits the pennies one way. From his belt dangle only a leather flask and a wooden tally rod, notched for each village that has lodged him since Martinmas. He owns no instrument. Truth be told, he can't carry a tune, but he's memorized more rhythm and cadence than a lark knows dawn. The entire cottage consents that for the next candle's length they're going to forget chilblains and unpaid tithes, because this man's voice knows secret alleys through the ear, straight into the skull's warm theatre where pictures bloom. The first words fall like trout into still water, quiet but plosive enough to dimple every listener's concentration. There were once 3 nights of wicked snow, and on the first night the moon went missing. Modern audiences raised on cinema might expect thunder, but medieval know-how teaches suspense by subtraction. The hush itself makes knuckles crawl. A good rural teller modulates dialect, grainy consonants to hook older farmers, sly Latin tag to flatter the parish clerk. A winked rude pun so livestock boy in the doorway doesn't feel barred by church Latin. He counts breaths to gauge attention. Toddlers sway on mothers' laps. The blacksmith leans forward until beard singes near the fire. Satisfied, he loosens the story's reins and lets it canter. The craft he practices is older than charters. Before parchment grew cheap, before monks baked ink from gall nuts, oral memory was Europe's public library. Folk still recite genealogies that double as land deeds, homilies chunked into alliterative slabs no thief could pocket, beast fables hiding herbal wisdom. If scribes are parchment architects, storytellers are its travelling librarians, bodies stuffed with unbound pages. Literacy hovers between 5 and 10% of population, and nearly all who can read parchment live in abbeys or manor halls. Peasants taste scripture and royal edict only through second-hand voice, priest's sermon, steward's proclamation, or through these rough-booted bards who fold holy awe and tavern crudity into one swallowable bolus. Like minstrels, storytellers survive by circuit economics. Southern villages hire them during olive press, northern parishes lure them after harvest, when grain barns echo and nights chew, 15 hours. The teller times arrivals to saints' vigils when workers can spare coin, a cracked pewter spoon, a cheese heel, 2 nights in hayloft. He tallies each as story wage on that belt rod. But the most valuable payment is gossip, which roads are barred by brigands, which bishop died of the flux, where the Genoese ships birthed another pestilence. He collects tidbits the way hedge witches gather herbs, drying, bundling, ready to dose. When he trades them 2 villages onward, the information saves someone's tax, assembles a dowry, or warns of conscription. No parchment courier matches that spidery network. Skeptics ask how he remembers 10,000 lines without slipping. He would answer that words memorize themselves if you hammer them to music. Even in prose he rides internal pump of 4 beat half lines, bone white the moon, black wing the crow, iron hard the frost, midnight cried woe. He stacks formula. An old man is thin as a rake, beard like lamb's wool. A maiden, bright as Easter, quick as a swallow. Those frames are scaffolds. He slots new bricks, but scaffolding holds shape. Forget one epithet, and tongue finds the next ladder rung, sharp as gorse, keen as shears, bright as brass. Pattern means never falling through silence. Variation isn't error, it's a feature. 2 counties north, the crow morphs into a nightjar because peasants there fear nightjars more. At coastal fairs, the same plot swaps a snowstorm for a rising tide because fishermen must dread drowning. These micro-edits are adaptive camouflage that keeps the tale digestible. The teller is both author and sponge. He watches faces when a joke lands flat, surgically removes it at the next recital. He hears a blacksmith roar at an improvised quip. Into permanent canon it goes, credited to old anvil brains of Brackenby. Rudeness is the spice he wields carefully. A fablio about nuns bathing naked in a millstream can rattle the priest unless balanced by a postscript praising virgin martyrs. Tellers read the room's moral geology. A Puritan leaning reeve near Easter might trigger penitent tones. Shrovetide carnivals demand bawdiness. Keeping one foot in the gutter and one on the rude screen ensures bookings across factions. Story menus usually open with a local tie-in, how Devil's Dyke formed when Satan dropped his shovel, why the church bell cracked on Pentecost. That buys trust and anchors geography. Next, a middle bout of high romance. In this cottage maybe Sir Eglamour of Artois, tossed in precisely because its geography is foreign and thus exotic. Final course centres on moral needlework stitched to parish concerns. Trickster fox who robs greedy miller, praising fair weight. The structure is both entertainment and subtle sermonizing against grievances villagers dare not voice to their lord. The teller also risks managing politics. Crown spies do roam, and seditious rumours earn gallows. When he mentions tax rebellion, he frames it in older legends like Flanders Weavers or biblical Israelites. Listeners decode, Pharaoh is king, whip is poll tax. The authorities hearing might shrug, ancient scripture, harmless. Peasants hear war drums, double-speak is survival. Occasionally he partners with a minstrel clutching rebec or tabor, dividing coin halves hunger, but doubles draw. The musician underscores climatic beats, plucks a G-drone while the climax glitters, or slams a drum when giants' footfalls shake valleys. If no minstrel is present, he replicates the drum with staff thumps on the floor. He can fake owl hoots, wolf growls, door hinges, battlefield kettle drums with only throat and palms. The cottage's infants jolted at the boom, anchoring memory by adrenaline. He counts children as capital. They'll recite his taglines weeks after he's gone. So he seeds catchphrases, mark me well, or 7 stones and 1. Kids chant them in pastures until shepherds know plot beats by osmosis. Thus his reputation outraces him like a smoke signal. When he trudges into the next village, the children herald him. Mother, it's the 7 stones man. In spring, storytellers pivot to news courier. Merchants hungering for northern market prices hire them to relay rates south. A competent teller can recite a roster of 10 commodities, 3 grades each, including last known coin values, and still garnish with jokes so numbers stick. He signs no contract. Honor code suffices. Break trust once, word darts faster than his stride, and lodgings vanish. Summer fairs widen the stage. Straw-laid arenas sprout by dusk, lanterns throwing halos. Tellers duel in pairs, each granted 30 heartbeats to outdo last flourish. The audience pelts dullards with sheep dung. Winners pocket copper, maybe a decent belt buckle. Stories balloon to spectacle. He'll unsheathe a wooden dagger, mimic dragon roar, toss breadcrumbs high as sparks. But his essence remains that winter cottage, intimate hush, where every cracked knuckle ticks a clock until dawn. Milking. Female tellers, though rarer, weave separate circuits, often midwife by day, hearth bard by night. They corner a niche of childbirth charms, herbal lore disguised as fairy bargains. Men cannot challenge themselves because they don't own the womb stories. A woman who stitches placenta disposal advice into allegory wields power beyond the king's decree. Even the priest might ask her quiet counsel when his sister's labour stalls. Church responses oscillate. Some abbots invite storytellers to spice saints' legends, boosting pilgrimage donations. Others brand them pests. Council of Trenton's forerunner councils warn against profane fables. Yet church organists slip coins to bard for new verses that fit existing chant melodies. Liturgy hunger cannibalizes taboo. Pestilence, years reposition demand. When plague empties half cottages, survivors crave tales of afterlife and cosmic justice. Storytellers pivot, resurrect apocalypse dragons, trumpet-mouth archangels, but always sweeten gloom with mortal hope. Shepherd returns from death with herb that cures next child. Listeners exhale, even fairy counters thin some terror. Love game, bobbing for apples. An autumn's dusk drapes the village in smoke-blue gauze, and the air smells of turned earth, crushed rosemary, and the faint metallic tang of frost hiding in tomorrow's sunrise. From surrounding little crofts, families converge on the green, carrying rush torches, bread trenchers, and, crucially, a woven creel of apples, gleaned after the final cartloads for cider, have trundled off to the manor press. Nobody pretends these fruits are prime. Their skins bloom with russet freckles, some wear scars from summer hail, and a few are tinier than a squire's signet ring. Yet for one enchanted evening they will outshine cloth of gold goblets, because the apples are about to become tokens in the most delightful gamble medieval peasants know, the love game of bobbing. Even the name of the festival bends to region. In Devon, you'd call it snap-apple. In Flanders, vissen naar liefde, fishing for love. In the Tyrolean Alps, it might be apfeltauchen. In today's hamlet, tucked somewhere between the North Sea salt wind and an inland ridge, they simply say the apple night. Timing is critical. Grain shocks have been stooked, flax retters bubble in ponds, sheep are driven from high pasture, but winter has not yet closed its iron fist. Night after Michaelmas, as the last quarter moon thins like a paring knife, villagers stage this rite because the harvest gods are still listening, and because dark hours lengthen, inviting mischief that can ripen into betrothal before Candlemas. Preparations whirl all afternoon. Women scrub a half-barrel until oak staves release cider ghosts. Then they drag it to the green, prop it level with 3 flat stones, and fill to the brim with brook water so cold it smokes in colder air. The reeve donates a dash of cider vinegar for luck, but really as to sharpen the shine so torches flare golden in reflection. Meanwhile, the unmarried men loiter by the communal bake-oven, knives in fist, each carving his initials, or, more often, secret runes, into an apple's cheek. Superstition hums here. Razor nicks must pierce only the skin, never gouge flesh, lest fortunes seep out with juice. They rub mint on cuts, so the letters darken when oxidized, then parade to the barrel and drop the fruit with outward nonchalance that betrays hammering hearts. Women, daughters of ploughmen, nieces of the mill, widowed maids with dowries thinned by plague, watch this offering like falconers observing fledgling hawks. Each girl pretends to focus on her own apple, cupped like a sacrament, as she scratches a symbol opposite the stem. Smudged heart, a stylized ploughshare, occasionally the initial of the man she dreams of, though etching that openly risks teasing. They line along the trestle, waiting their turn, slippers crunching chaff. The bucket of female apples will be hidden for later rounds. The opening act belongs to bachelor fruit. The officiant tonight is old Driva, a midwife wielding authority tempered over 60 winters. Her voice can hush drunken ploughboys, yet she spangles instructions with teasing to melt tension. She consults her hazel wand, mostly for show, though nobody doubts she converses privately with orchard sprites, and taps the barrel rim thrice. Silence falls, except for geese gossiping in the distance. First contestant is Arden Bolter, Smithy's nephew, cheeks glowing furnace red, hair smelling faintly of charcoal. He kneels, clasping wrists behind back to prove no cheating, then leans until nose skims water. Apples dart away like startled perch. Surface tension gleams silver across candle reflections. Onlookers sway unconsciously, as if collective will might herd a rogue apple within his jaw's reach. Arden exhales a watery blossom of breath to shift targets, plunges bites, and misses. Chuckles roll through the circle. He tries again, head dipping deeper, water splashes sashaying around freckles of torchlight. Missed 2. A third lunge ends with an apple captured but slipping away at last instant. 3 strikes. Old Driva shakes wand, declares the omen. 3 tries! You gamble with storms, lad. Wife that waits for you will fight you and maybe win. Laughter bubbles, but it's genial. Plenty of men saddled with 3. Try prophecies still carve happy marriages. Prophecies steer attitude more than destiny. Next up is Merrin, Reeve's youngest daughter, milk-cheeked, quick-eyed. She steps barefoot onto grainy soil, hikes wool skirts above knee for better reach, and in the soft gasps of village boys you sense half of them would trade this year's piglet for her nod. She kneels, neck a long curve, like swan down, inhales, then lets weight shift forward in one graceful arc. Everyone watches water close over braided hair. 1 heartbeat, 2. Her shoulders ripple, then she emerges clutching an apple between teeth as cleanly as a hawk, snatching fledgling. The crowd erupts. Water streams from her chin, yet triumph flares brighter than torchlight. Prophecy is generous. First try success means destiny sealed, soul-bound as 2 timbers pegged by oak pins. Which bachelor's rune scars that apple? Torches converge to read CK scratched near stem. That is, Callum of the Kiln, potter's son, currently gaping open-mouthed by a bake-oven. In 3 cottages, mothers exhale. They suspected but now confirm. Merrin bites an apple once to seal luck, slips it into an apron pocket, and steps back into anonymity that fools no one. Water spills with renewed energy as a turns cycle. Some dunkers whiff gloriously, making village memories for years. One maiden surfaces sputtering apple seeds. Her tooth pierces fruit skin, rule violation earning playful catcalls. Each attempt prints new droplets down barrel. By 10th competitor, a chill mist fluffs permanent halo over staves, and young torchbearers edge closer for warmth and vantage. While bobbing unfurls as centerpiece, romance choreography spreads. Peripheral fires roast hazelnuts, crackling pops echoing cheers, and there beneath chestnut trees 2 shy souls trade tokens, a heel of rye bread overlapped by squares of homespun cloth. Minimalist dowry negotiations disguised as snack share. Elsewhere, a shepherd tunes 3-hole pipe. Its lilting drone offers background for murmured compliments. Apple night amplifies courting otherwise squeezed between weed-pulling and Sunday sermons. Our lens widens to Europe because historians reading parish rolls and travellers' diaries connect the same rite under variant masks. In Normandy, apples float in milk at Candlemas. Devon's version uses cider laced with brandy to guarantee giggles. Calabrian villages substitute blood oranges late in season. Welsh miners adapt with carved slate discs when apple crops fail, though discs seldom stay afloat, producing comedic sinkings that rumour-mongers call love drowning. Whether fruit or stone, predictive schema repeats: single bite, perfect union; second bite, prickly marriage; third, doom. Layers of numerology underpin superstition. Medieval sermonizers preach Holy Trinity. Folkloric magicians reassign triad, hope, hazard, heartbreak. Symbolism roots deep in pre-Christian loam. Apple halves reveal star pentagrams mapping to Venus cycle, goddess of love. Monastic herbalists list Malus domestica as aphrodisiac when candied. Pagan echoes linger in orchard wassailing. Villagers bang pots among branches midwinter to wake fruit spirits, pour cider on roots as libation. Apple night slots into this continuum. Human desire blossoms via fruit once more offered to unseen powers. Medieval bowling. No one remembers whose idea it was to stand 9 knobbly bits of elm in a ragged triangle at the edge of the grazing common, but by the time the village bailiff strolled past and demanded to know why half the cattle field was roaring like Easter ale house, the game was already older than anyone alive. Each pin was a stump hacked from wind-thrown branches, thick at the base, tapering just enough to invite gravity's betrayal, and planed, smooth only where repeated collisions had scoured off bark. A single kingpin sat foremost, honour denied modern bowling's discreet equilateral layout. If you clipped that leading stump, 3 good ones behind usually followed like choirboys dragged by cassock hems. Almost every medieval settlement knew a version of this diversion. In the chalk villages of the South Downs they called it kittle pins. In the Black Forest it was Kegelspiel. A Lombard manuscript from 1282 labels it Birilli, though the sketch shows 9 targets like squat wine bottles, not the 10 favoured by later alley keepers. Monks along the Rhine preserved a still older design, 9 cobbles salvaged from river dredgings, each whitewashed and chalk-marked with a demon's glyph set upright in cloister garths for spiritual marksmanship. Hagiographers claimed the brothers invented the ritual in the 3rd century after a travelling deacon preached that life's task was toppling idols. Historians suspect the monks merely repurposed an already ancient folk pastime and bolted a sermon onto it because that justified giggling under the refectory windows. The game's arithmetic simplicity was its genius. You required only something that could fall and something that could make it fall. First a staff or spare spar from an ox cart. Later, when bruised shins and cracked joints begged mercy, a stout ball of wood big enough to feel purposeful, yet small enough for peasant wages to afford. Ash and beech dominated northern forests. Both carved easily and survived damp. The village carpenter rounded a block by eye, rolling it across dirt until it wouldn't wobble, then sealed paws with sheep tallow and lamp black. Owners personalized with burnt-in sigils or crude letters, a hooked G for Godwin the Reeve, a triple cross for the priest, a heart for Maud Carter, who never threw but bet accurately as any bookkeeper. Daytime labour left the green largely empty until vespers. At mid-afternoon's first owl hoot, forests crowded overhead so tightly daylight dimmed early, the miller locked his sluice, wiped chaff flakes off tunic, and led the charge to the alley, which was not alley at all but a beaten lane of turf scorched by midsummer carnivals. Rules depended on weather, temperament, and who supplied ale. Some nights you gained a point for every pin toppled. Other nights the bet rested solely on striking the king pin but leaving his retinue standing, proof of surgical skill. There were no printed scorecards. Status and memory did the tallying. A notch cut on a hazel wand served for especially glorious feats. A whole row of notches turned the stick into a walking staff, heavy with bragging rights. Because the equipment was cheap, children learned early. A 5-year-old could barely heft the ball, but parents carved miniature sets from applewood. Toddlers toddled among fallen pins like jesters among toppled courtiers. The older lads coached technique, swing from lats, not wrist, loose elbow, step wide, release low. The best could make a ball skim across grass, graze first pin, ricochet so cunningly that rear most targets collapsed in domino chase. When the village inherited a patch of glacial silt, firmer than sod, their skittles matured. On hardpack you could coax spin. The ball developed a gloss over seasons, grease and rain, polishing it until reflections wobbled like saints' halos in well water. Skittles gained sudden prestige each spring fair, when 3 or 4 parishes convened for sheep shearing, cheese venditions, and a contest that awarded a silver clasp, really pewter, but burnished, to whoever felled all 9 stumps thrice without a miss. Diplomats in velvet might have parleyed over crusade debts somewhere else, but for shearers and swineherds this was their tourney. They wagered geese, whetstones, half a morning's plough help, whatever small economies could accept losing. Gambling squeezed tension into every silence before the roll. Even the priest, obliged to frown at wagers, hovered at elbow's edge, sleeves hiding how his thumb stroked rosary beads when his favourite bowyer prepared to throw. Equipment parity mattered. Parish bylaws demanded each competitor use the same communal ball, repaired with fresh lashings of tallow the night before. Pins wore different scars but should weigh equal by handful. Old Drever, the midwife, officiated balance tests. She swung pin on a flax cord. If it rotated true, she declared it honest. If it pitched, the carpenter shaved or wedged until mass matched. The fairness ritual became half the show. Villagers chanted good-natured jeers when Drever condemned a pin as plump as the Lord's purse. Once the game started, courtesies dissolved. A crooked bounce that blasted pins into a watcher's shins generated stories retold for Lent. Technique diversified with geography. In wetter marshlands of Holland, bowlers used a looper motion, lifting ball high so it slapped mud, surfed forward, and proportioned power by suction. Alpine valleys favoured sidearm swings because narrow goat paths offered no straight run-up. English Midlands championed a pendulum roll, step-step release, body following ball like kite tail. Travelling craftsmen who shifted counties building barns or mending drain sluices carried these styles like pollen. Soon a Kentish thatcher displayed unexpected curve, learned near Ghent, and local lads spent twilight practicing mimicry until their wrists ached in the morning flax field. The game's informality hid cultural glue. Skittles finals echoed medieval law courts. Spectators served as jury on foul disputes, establishing communal jurisprudence before village charters ever inked. If a thrower's toe crossed chafed plimsoll line, shouts erupted, majority voice ruled. That democratic moment carved respect across class lines. A domain serf's vote weighed the same as a freeholder's when pins lay askew and truth teetered. Not every ruling stuck. Ale-inspired bias could warp a verdict, but subsequent games remembered grievances and strove for redress. Over decades, the green became parliament. Later, real parliaments adopted skittle vocabulary, knocked them down, set them up, as metaphors of victory and rebuilding. Church tolerance oscillated. Monks who had pioneered stone tipping centuries earlier kept up a love affair, even compiling house records like Brother Arnold felled 9 3 times fourscore pence on Vigil of St. David. But outside cloisters, some churchmen sniffed sin. A 1326 diocesan synod damned pin games accompanied by oaths, drunkenness, and Sabbath neglect. Predictably, the proclamation whetted appetite. Skittles after Sunday Mass became emblem of lay independence. Parishioners dutifully sang Te Deum, queued for wafer, then bolted to green while curate folded vestments. When constables tried fining play, they found half the village missing, hidden among hazels where alternative clearing, the Devil's Alley, thrummed with laughter. Eventually, priests compromised. Tournaments allowed on saints' vigils, provided winnings fund a candle before Mary's altar. The scheme worked. Candles blazed brighter, church upkeep rose, and no one lost Saturday sport. Material scarcity spurred ingenuity. Not every hamlet boasted straight branches thick enough for durable pins, so coastal folk shaped driftwood. Highland crofters stacked flat stones like cairns, counting a collapse if pile lost balance. In limestone districts, boys carved pins from chalk, then tore them apart mid-game to mark frames, creating double utility, scoring and target. A journeyman cooper passing through Burgundy wrote that one village used baked loaves once a year at Epiphany. If you shattered a loaf, you collected the crumbs. Game ended with shared supper. Water jousting. Long before any church bell breaks the mist, villagers gather along the reed-lined banks of the slow, green river that stitches their shire to the distant sea. They come with half-blind grandfathers hobbling on willow canes, broom-haired children swinging stubby sticks like swords, and baskets full of yesterday's rye bread meant to tide them through the hours ahead. On the west bank, 2 clinker-built punts lie beached, gunnels barely higher than a man's knee, paint scabbed by a dozen summers. Across the water 2 more craft wait, each long and narrow as an eel, and balanced so close to the waterline that stepping wrong would dunk a crew before the contest even starts. By sunrise, every plank will creak under the weight of water jousters, peasants with calloused palms, laughter primed by cheap ale, and just enough boldness to parody the aristocratic sport that fuels ballads and bankrupts barons. Water jousting is a strange hybrid, half carnival, half training ground, and wholly immune to most of the bone-splintering dangers that mark its land-based cousin. Instead of destriers shod in iron, contestants mount boats. Instead of ash lances barked by heralds, they brandish pine poles shaved taper-thin at one end and padded with hog bristle at the other. The object remains unchanged from tilting tourney fields. Unhorse, here, unboat, your opponent by force or guile. Yet the basic geometry of river and oar adds layers of improvisation no armoured knight ever bothered to learn. Currents shift, punts yaw, ducks explode upward when prows slice lilies, and one well-timed wave slap can spoil perfect aim by nudging a lance out of alignment. Where the game began depends on which chronicler you trust. An 11th century Bavarian codex credits Rhine fishermen who, bored during slack tides, bet beer that they could knock rivals off skiffs with net poles. Venetian records claim Anatolian oarsmen first staged the dance, citing a 997 Doge's edict limiting giostra dell'acqua to daylight so gondoliers would still ferry passengers by dusk. The French naturally cite a Carolingian precedent, villagers of Sète tilting from wine barges while Charlemagne's scouts looked on, concluding that even peasants needed an arena to bleed excess zeal. Regardless of cradle, by the 13th century water jousting has sailed arterial rivers from the Guadalquivir to the Vistula, each region embossing its own etiquette onto the wet canvas. Today's tournament week in our Midlands hamlet, they call it Splash Tide, opens with a ritual as formulaic as Mass. First, the warboards are chosen, local punts light enough for 4 oars, but broad enough to cradle a jouster, braced on a waist-high wooden dais built just aft of midship. Carpenters nail fresh cleats. The village blacksmith sharpens metal crutches that will anchor the platform's back legs into plank joins. Oarsmen, usually brothers or cousins, swear to pull by rhythm, not by pride, because one mistimed stroke will spin the bow and expose the jouster's flank to rival spears. They warm hands in ash, then smear handles with tallow laced with sand for grit. Next arrives gear inspection. Each jouster's pole must obey the 3L rule, 3 English L's, about 11 feet, long, 2 hands at the butt, tapered to a padded crown. Padding comprises toe rags bound with tarred cord and capped by 4 pointed leather petals, dyed bright, for team pride. Officials, today, old Lidda, the alewife, chosen because nobody dares argue with her, probe padding for hidden iron nails. Cheaters occasionally embed brads to rip tunics or puncture cheeks. Lidda whacks suspicious lances against her own shin to prove softness. A rumour swirls that city teams soak pole tips in hog's blood, so splatter blinds opponents. Lidda scoffs. Blood attracts midges, not victory. Colours demarcate sides. River North wears blue sashes stitched with eel bones. River South ties nettle green ribbons on spear shafts. Some tournaments draw multiple parishes and thus a confetti of hues, crimson of red clay villages downriver, yellow of flax field clans upriver. But our local derby keeps to 2, reenacting an origin myth wherein North Bank folk accused South Bank millers of stealing waterhead. Historians doubt theft occurred. What matters is that quarrel matured into ritual combat safer than torch-lit raiding parties. Opening procession feels equal parts crusade muster and harvest foolery. A drummer straddles ale tun on a hay cart, rapping cadence as oarsmen march behind. Jousters, each in linen shirt and hose, armour would sink them like blacksmith's tongs. Balance poles upright, brass finials glinting where sunlight knives through oak branches. One pole bears a turnip impaled at its crown, comic effigy of chivalric pennons. Crowd hoots approval. Clergy attend in ambiguous attitude. They preach humility, yet relish satire that deflates knightly arrogance. The priest sprinkles river with holy water, quoting Christ walking on waves. A jester mimics by skipping pebbles. The first bout pairs novices, apprentice potters, maybe 17, raw with energy. Their boats push off from opposite reeds, steered by sweep oars until hulls ride parallel channels roughly 30 paces apart. Then coxswains angle bows for converging lanes. Water sloshes under thwarts. Sunlight dazzles ripples. Lily pads swirl in outrush. At mid-river the punts accelerate, oars digging like twin 6-legged beasts. The jousters drop knees, rear foot hooked under balcony rail, forward hip hugging waist bar. They hug poles along ribs, point tips sky high until the final yaw when arms extend, torsos cantilever, and spear lines stiffen as if seamstressed from shoulder seam to hog bristle crown. Impact rarely equals expectation. One novice thrusts too soon. His pole bounces off rival's shield, a round wicker pannier painted with onion juice. Recoil jolts his elbow, momentum pitches him backward, only rope belly bands save him. Crowd laughs, friendly yet merciless. "Hold fast, Baba!" Second novice times pierce but misjudge current. Spear skids off gunwale, scraping paint, raises splinter spray, but no swimmer yet. Boats drift past one another, crews back water to realign. In land joust, horses would wheel. On water, inertia hands jousters second chances. The second pass proves decisive. Potter on south bank leans far, eyes fixed on opponent's sternum, thrusts last instant into chest. Padded crown thuds, north bank lad loses grip, flails, balance gone. He tumbles sideways with splash that douses drummer ashore. Crowd roars, coins flip into baskets. South bank waves banners. North bank oars haul dripping hero into punt, where he shivers but grins, for water forgives fails. He lives to duel another heat, though coxswain curses added ballast seeping into planks. Seasoned jousters ride next waves. One, nicknamed Grey Gosling, fought as a kipper, a knight's tackle-bearer, in a tournament 2 counties east. He knows momentum, angles, and intimidation tricks. Instead of plain linen, he dons a saffron-dyed surcoat laced dingily at sides, fabric billowing to fake a larger torso. He barks at oarsmen with clipped commands, 2 beats fast, 1 slow, pivot on starboard just before clash. As punts converge, Gosling dips spear-tip to water, sending a spray arc that blinds the opponent's peripheral. Then he lances upward, not forward, hooking under rival's outstretched armpit. Physics does rest. Upward jerk wrenches opponent's center of mass. Man pirouettes like disgruntled heron, hitting water head first. Technique draws gasps. Children exchange awed whispers. Wizardry of the river lists. There are no written brackets. Old Lidder keeps the match ladder in memory, adjusting based on daylight. Single elimination Whittlesfield. Losers become peanut gallery hecklers, vantage from which they refine cunning for next year. Mid-afternoon intermission sees crews beach punts, carpenters caulk popped seams with wads of sheep wool, fishermen haul ale in nets chilled by river water, mothers ladle wormwood-infused broth to warm bellies, rumour claims wormwood wards cramp for those who fall, musicians on bagpipe and tabor belt tunes that mimic oar cadence, toddlers stomp mud, mocking boat rhythm, spectacle layers satire. Between rounds, 4 jockey-sized lads straddle barrels and mimic charger mounts while friends push them along the bank. One knight sports colander helm, another brandishes broom lance. They collide, topple into nettles, raising laughs at the expense of armoured nobility. Water joust, in this sense, is a social vent, opportunity for farmers to lampoon feudal pageantry. They cannot afford mail or warhorse, yet here their reflexes and river savvy overshadow any shield with fleur-de-lis crest. Occasionally visiting squires join, eager to prove panache. They often fare poorly, their horse-honed balance ill-suited to boats veering with eddies. Late rounds adjust rules, lances sharpened by removing some padding, platforms slicked intentionally with butter to test footwork. Grey Gosling reaches the final opposite Branca the tanner's daughter, yes. Women joust if nerve allows. Branca learned on a tanner pontoon near Die Vats. She wields a spear shorter than regulation, but officials nod. She compensates with reach of arm equal to any man's. Her boat, narrower, glides swiftly. Banter along shore hushes. The final pot contains wages of 2 lambs, a length of dyed fustian, even the priest's promise of vespers, sung in losing parish dialect for a week. The clash sequence goes 3 times. First pass, nothing but shield scrape. Second, Branca dips low, hooking under Gosling's padding. He counters by twisting hips, absorbing strike, thrusting downward. Her pole shaft vibrates, but she holds. Third pass sees cunning. Her coxswain, reading subtle swirl, calls for half-stroke starboard, side-slipping boat. Gosling miscalculates, overextends. Branca's pole butt plants on his chest and shoves. He teeters, arms pinwheeling, curses Latin borrowed from knights, then plunges backward with thunder splash. South bank erupts, green ribbons wave. Old Lidder crowns Branca with an alder wreath dipped in cider spiked with honey. Grey Gosling surfaces sputtering, bows theatrically, acknowledges superior rivercraft, and audience hails sportsmanship. With champion declared, festivities pivot to free splash. Commoners of all ages cluster into boats, sans lances, paddling figure eights, purposely tipping craft just to squeal as cold water invades. Any prestige from joust roars evaporates under camaraderie. Victors tow losers for piggy back rides. Grandad Goodwin is lowered gently into shallows to relieve gout by chill. Ale flows. Moon slides up like polished coin. Torches flicker across black water dotted with laughing silhouettes. Some sing ballads about legendary Sir Percival tipped into Grail Lake by swan ladies. Others invent doggerel mocking a local tax farmer who last year capsized before even raising a lance. Gamble coins are scarce, but risk is cheap. Picture a night after harvest wages have been paid in clipped pennies and thumb-sized farthings. A thatcher called Ellis slaps the last wisp of rye from his tunic, ducks through the alehouse door, blinks at torchlight bouncing off smoke, and sees what he knew would be waiting. 3 men, a woman with an apron full of dried beans, and a crude trestle table whose top is polished only where knuckles, cups and dice have scoured splinters smooth. The air hums with malt and recklessness. Someone wraps a pair of bone cubes against an empty horn beaker, and already Ellis's pulse drums faster than the tabor player who bangs time for dancers outside. Gambling is older than guilds, older than parish boundaries. Roman legionaries tossed taily knucklebones by fortress fires. Saxon then wagered rings while skalds sang. By the Middle Ages, peasants inherited a full toolbox of chants, pitching copper, pennies, toward a wall, flipping oyster shells painted black on one side, drawing straw lots, racing dung beetles, and, most intoxicating, rolling dice. Of all the variants, none light eyes across Christendom like Hazzard, ancestor of modern craps. The rules vary lane to lane, but the spine stays true. Call a main between 5 and 9. Throw the bones. Hope fate kisses your choice. If the pips crown your number, you sweep stakes. If they betray you, the stake vanishes like a dropped candle into rushes. Dice appear simple, cubes of bone, antler, cherry wood, or, for those lucky enough, ivory, trimmed from a bishop's broken crozier. Yet peasants believe each die hosts sprites, fickle ghosts that favour bold wagers, curse timid hands. They test cubes by rolling 100 times, counting pips to sniff bias. If 7 shows too often, they call it blessed. If snake eyes slither out disproportionately, they speak of a cloven hoof hiding inside. Still they roll because knowledge of danger sharpens flavour. Royal disgust arrives early. King Richard I, Lionheart to crusade poets, purse-string miser to tax-soaked villagers, issues an ordinance during his 1190 campaign. No man under knight's rank may stake more than 1 shilling in a single day. He reasons that soldiers who gamble away pay become deserters or beggars, burdens on supply. The edict reaches English shires months later, copied in scriptorium ink, so watery, you can see parchment hairs beneath letters. Village reeves read the proclamation aloud on Sunday greens. Peasants mutter that a king across sea cannot feel itch in their fingers. Enforcement falters. A king's officer rarely rides muddy byways after dusk to police 2 bone cubes rattling in a barn. Besides, sheriffs themselves love hazard. A constable will seize illegal stakes, pocket the best die, and join the next round under a cowl of anonymity. So the cubes keep dancing. They dance in cider cellars whose rafters drip spiced steam, on alehouse benches scarred by tusk knives, and under hedges where moonlight stripes grass. A single copper halfpenny can spin an hour's excitement, first bet, second doubling, third doubling again, until a mound of coins heavy enough that breath shortens just looking. When money runs thin, stakes shift. A lad offers his best moleskin cap. A girl matches with a skein of flax. A widower raises a gamble by placing the next day's goose eggs on the wood. Nobody thinks about porridge tomorrow, only the rattle, the suspense-soaked heartbeat between clatter and outcome. Ask clergy, and they will chant sin warnings. The penitential of Burchard lists dice among vices that sell the soul for air. Parish priests preach against Fortuna's wheel, yet even they concede that Hazzard can mediate local justice, settling debts when courts are distant, redistributing hoarded wealth. After Mass, you might see the same priest lurking by tavern window, curious which farmhand luck favours. When the bishop's visit looms, chairs and dice vanish. A day later, they slither back like cats who know which mistress truly feeds them. Why dice instead of cards? Playing cards will not reach Europe in bulk until late 14th century. Italian traders import them from Mamluk ports. Dice, meanwhile, require only a scrap bone, shin-off mutton stew carved with awl, dots inked by soot and tallow. A boy can craft a set while ewes chew cud. Some dice are asymmetrical, pips drill deeper on 6 than 1, weighting outcomes. Players soon test by float method, dropping die in bucket of brine to see which face swims upward. Accusations of cogging flare into brawls. Tavern rule lists scraped onto door lintels warn first man caught gaffing bones to be ducked in the trough. The trough is icy, reeking of cabbage rinse. Fear of it polices fairness better than any parchment law. Hazzard's cadences call and thunder. The caster declares main 7, and everyone hushes. He shakes the horn, lip cracked where 2 centuries of teeth have gnawed, and slings dice across boards scored with random gouges. They tumble, ricochet off cup, land skidding. Eyes flicker. 8. A collective groan from backers, opposing punters who set against the main bang cups in triumph. Stakes sweep sides like tide. Another round fires instantly, adrenaline begging new risk. Because peasants live by season, gambling calendars follow. Winter nights stretch long, lamp oil is dear, dice games pack barns tight with breath-fogging beams. Lambing season reduces rounds, shepherds earmark ewes can't spare midnight. After harvest wages pulse coins into pockets, October sees fever pitch, so much that some lords delay rent collection until after Michaelmas, hoping peasants lose silver to dice before tithes are due. Those lords then lease tavern rights, recouping via ale. Village stories bloom around miraculous or cursed streaks. Folklore speaks of Red Dobbin, a ploughman who rolled double sixes 6 times, won a cow, and next morning found it dead from staggers. A reminder, Fortuna loans gifts with interest. Another tale of Wilder Spindle, milkmaid turned abbey cook. Wagered her hair ribbon, lost, but charmed winner with laughter. They wed. Their grandson later spun linen empire. Moral, sometimes losing wins. Such parables reincarnate each generation, reinforcing the dice's role as spiritual teacher in probabilities cloaked as fate. Women gamble too, though society pretends otherwise. Market days end with dairy wives huddled behind herb stalls tossing walnut shells and cherry pits. Odd pit wins. Winnings might be onion bulbs or pinches of saffron. Midwife records from Lincolnshire list fines imposed for casting lots on a birthing stool. Village gossip claims such dice predicted the baby's gender. Church courts frown but seldom prosecute. Too many male jurors recall their mother's own superstitious toss. When money is truly absent, peasants gamble in hands, future labour owed. A shepherd stakes 2 days mending stone walls. A cooper pledges 3 ale casks. Contracts scratched on beechwood shavings, witnessed by alewife, stand in manorial courts. Default invites seizure of scythe or even body for debt bondage. Scholars note gambling thereby becomes an informal credit system where interest rate floats on luck. Opposition to dice collects moral, economic, and military fears. Richard I's edict passes chain to successors. Henry VII repeats, forbidding dice within archery butts lest bow practice lapse. Parliament of 1541, Act for Fencing and Archery, explicitly bans playing at the dice for commoners under £100 land rent. Enforcement again wobbles. A yeoman archer can claim dice-hone nerves for battlefield randomness. Sheriffs nod, palm coin, stroll away. Bear fighting and other blood sports. The market square smells of tallow candles, trodden hay, and a tension so sour it makes even the geese hiss at shadows. Townsfolk have been gathering since sunrise, staking their places along the wooden rail that rims a pit gouged into the beating heart of the settlement. Merchants in fur-trimmed hoods jostle for elbow room next to dairy girls still streaked with cow dung. An alderman's wife shares a trencher of figs with a barefoot ragpicker, as though the gulf between their purses had dissolved in torch smoke. No one speaks of piety or plague today, they have come for the bear. A tether pole stands skewered at the pit's centre, an oak trunk shaved smooth by countless iron collars and by the frantic twisting of the beasts chained to it. 6 feet up, a swivel ring awaits its latest prisoner. Below that, the packed earth is pitted with gouges from claws, nails and spades, muddied darker still by rains that rinsed yesterday's gore only halfway clean. A Saxon butcher's boy punts straw across the floor to soak what the next hour will spill. He whistles a tavern chorus, jaunty on the surface, but his eyes keep skimming the pit lip. Everyone remembers the afternoon 3 summers ago when an underfed old male broke free, vaulted the railing, and tore a cooper's arm off at the sleeve before crossbowmen could reload. The crowd later called it the day fortune changed sides. Today the bailiffs have doubled the chains. Peasants by royal decree cannot hunt deer, hart or hare. Those pleasures are fenced behind poaching laws punishable by loss of hand, ear or life. But no statute forbids them from paying a penny to watch violence served in spectacles designed for every appetite, cock spurs flashing at dawn, dog packs coursing badgers at noon, bull teasing in the orchard haze of late afternoon, and bear baiting as the bloody pièce de résistance when torches throw hell, fire highlights across jowls and jester bells. Denied the thrill of stalking game in forest shadow, villagers funnel what the chroniclers call primal red hunger into arenas where predation is not only permitted but merchandised. The bear chosen for today lumbers out of a clapboard cage pulled by two drovers wielding iron goads. She is smallish for her species, 2 winters by the yellowing of her teeth, but the price of larger animals has spiked since war's emptied woodlands, and the crowd still greets her with self-serving roar. They would cheer a dung heap if promised a splash. The drovers fasten collar to swivel, cinch a secondary chain from splice ring to a ground staple. Even before the crowd settles, 8 dogs, English mastiffs and curs of doubtful pedigree, strain on hemp leads at the opposite gate, nails, skittering planks, saliva stringing jaws like spider silk. Handlers slap rawhide thongs across flanks to stoke fury. At a trumpet squeal mimicked more by alehouse brass than battlefield silver, the first pair of dogs launch. The bear rises, hind legs braced, front paws beating air. She grunts, half roar, half wheeze, born of gut-deep confusion. No prey scent, no forest acoustics, only a roaring wall of 2-legged predators outside chain reach. One dog commits too high, her paw arcs down and snaps the spine with a report audible in the 15th row. Cheers detonate. The other dog circles, darts, clamps onto her haunch. She pivots, dragging man-thick oak into a slight bend. 2 more dogs surge. The chain sings, dust mushrooms. No chantry hymn, no court masque, no morality play. Broadcasts so visceral a narrative. Life, challenge, retaliation, collapse. Blood perks, floats as red pollen under torch flare. Wagers exchange hands faster than bread coppers at harvest fair. Not every village field bears weekly. Import networks radiate from Baltic traders who capture cubs in pit traps baited with berries, then drive them south in shuttered wagons. Abbeys sometimes stable bears for months, earning rent by touring to lay towns during feast weeks. Irony twists here. Monks who chant for mercy at Lord's will later invoice for a brewing who will not see the next full moon. Theologians square the circle by citing the bear as an emblem of sin subdued by virtue. Crowds translate that as sin being stuffed with hounds until its ribs cave. Bear baiting seduces every rung of hierarchy. Kings host private pits inside palace precincts so foreign ambassadors can marvel at English valour. London's Bankside lists 12 licensed arenas by 1580, each with painted signboards, a bear chained upright painted in cinnabar, a pack of dogs limned beneath. When Queen Elizabeth entertains hot-blooded visiting French nobles, she stages baiting instead of jousting, claiming it the national metal. Yet decades earlier, and far from Thames pageantry, a Fenland hamlet stages a remarkably similar rite with scrapwood and borrowed torches. Blood levels democratize. Cockfighting forms the provincial amuse-bouche. A cockpit is cheaper than a bear pit, 4 planks hammered into octagon, a purse of oats to fatten birds, a pocket knife to affix silver spurs. Feathered gladiators meet in a blur of keratin and shrill song that ends abruptly when one throat spurts pink. Villagers cluster barefoot around the ring edge, toes dusted, bets seldom cross more than 6pence, but stakes feel princely when you might need those coins for Easter tithes. Children run sidelines, retrieving lifeless birds for stew. Even defeat feeds someone. Bull teasing pushes tolerance further. Commons laws forbid wanton slaughter of livestock needed for milk and plough, so bull handlers choreograph cruelty without fatality. Rope affixed, ring through nostril, boys wave torches or snap whip tips to make the brute charge. Nimble youths vault fences at final blink. If a bull is injured, village reeve fines perpetrators lest landlord lose breeding fees. Spectators label the bloodsport rent, acceptable entertainment tax. On Michaelmas, a special bull run may course streets, horns greased, dogs nipping. Tanners claim it tenderizes hide. Why so much appetite for gore? Historians suggest catharsis for lives steeped in death already, plagues, childbirth peril, harvest failures. Yet there's a difference between suffering endured and violence chosen. Bloodsport repackages fear into a theatre where the audience wields illusion of control, place wager, pick dog, cheer bear, distancing fragile humanity from mortality's randomness. Some call it communal exorcism. Others call it boredom trimmed with adrenaline. Peasants, barred from boar hunts or stag coursing, channel warrior instincts here. A ploughman cheering a mastiff is, in his imagination, brother in arms beside crusading knights. His voice cracks as dogs surge, momentarily wearing a heraldic lion on chest. He returns to fields next dawn, but bragging rights lighten ploughshare. Local economies pivot on blood calendars. Dog breeders select lines for jaw width, chest girth. They trade pups on Whitsun fare for more than a milk cow's price. Blacksmiths forge collars studded with spikes angled outward, protecting necks. Alewives double batch volumes for baiting week. They craft a thick brew, bear stout, favoured by gentry who attend pits after high tables. Physicians hawk salves of goose fat and marigold for dog gashes, fetching a fee larger than treating human peasants. A micro-industry orbiting cruelty springs where agriculture alone cannot feed every ambition. Yet not all observers cheer. Monastic chronicler Matthew Paris in 1252 sketches bear pits with marginal note, ludus cruentus, minus placet deo, bloody play, displeasing to God. Late 14th century mystic Marjorie Kempe rails against beast flaying for laughter. Urban pamphleteers adopt a moral stance, though tinged with social envy. They blast citizens for casting angels into pit dust, implying waste of coin that might fund alms. Still, sermons flutter like banners in gale, crowds enlarge, the Reformation shifts the axis, Puritans equate bear extravaganzas with papist indulgence festivals, Oliver Cromwell's Parliament bans baiting in 1642, citing Sabbath respect and cruelty. Shutters slam on London's Hope Theatre turned bear ring, handlers pivot to illicit dawn matches, bribe watchmen, but legal teeth tighten. After Restoration, Charles II revives spectacle for court merriment, yet flicker of doubt persists. Philosophers like Montaigne question moral rights. Still, peasants far from print debates continue as always, ignorant or indifferent.